Picture a realm where the impossible becomes the daily architecture of the sky, a place where storms rage for centuries and oceans are hidden beneath miles of blinding ice. Millions of miles from the comforting warmth of our sun, a lonely golden machine gracefully dives through a narrow, unexplored gap between a massive planet and its shimmering rings. It is falling intentionally toward a tempest of unimaginable scale, preparing to sacrifice itself in a blaze of atmospheric friction just to taste the alien clouds. Imagine a tiny, diamond-bright moon orbiting just beyond this colossal giant, firing violent, silent plumes of liquid water directly into the freezing vacuum of deep space. These subterranean geysers paint the dark void with microscopic frost, weaving a ghostly, expansive halo around a world that is already crowned in crushed, glittering ice. Surprisingly, the universe has constructed this entire massive planetary system with such bizarre alien physics that the primary giant itself could easily bob like an apple upon a sufficiently large cosmic sea. This cosmic structure of rings and wandering moons operates as a perfect clockwork empire, completely detached from the frantic pace of our own terrestrial lives. Yet, as you lie here now, the immense distances and chaotic extremes of these distant celestial bodies pose absolutely no threat to your peace. The heavy, pulling tension of the day begins to evaporate from your muscles, sinking down into the mattress as you surrender to the quiet of the night. Deep within the comfortable sanctuary of your own room, your breathing slows and deepens, naturally matching the steady, majestic rotation of the spheres, turning quietly in the dark. The soft blankets wrap around you like a protective atmospheric shell, shielding you from the demands of the waking world and offering a space of total restoration. You're safe, enveloped in familiar warmth and gentle gravity, and these magnificent cosmic wonders are yours to inherit as you sleep. If we were to let the mind untether completely from the physical body, we could travel outward through the blackness on a journey of pure imagination. We leave the heavy atmosphere of Earth behind, crossing billions of miles of silent, empty space in a single, effortless breath to approach a pale, butterscotch sphere. We arrive at the very edge of an alien kingdom, watching as a magnificent ringed world reveals itself against the velvet backdrop of the stars. Floating in the deep freeze of the outer solar system, this colossal gas giant actively defies our terrestrial intuition of mass and gravity. Despite possessing an overwhelming physical volume second only to Jupiter, the sphere harbours a density so remarkably low that it is fundamentally lighter than ordinary water. If we were to somehow construct a sufficiently massive cosmic ocean, this enormous world would not sink into the dark abyss, but rather bob gently on the surface like a celestial apple. Such a strangely ethereal physical reality arises directly from its primordial composition, which remains overwhelmingly dominated by the absolute lightest elements in the universe. Immense quantities of hydrogen and helium gas are packed into an astronomical volume, effectively puffing the planet outward into a vast, low-density sphere. The sheer scale of this planetary buoyancy highlights the bizarre alien physics governing the outer reaches of our stellar neighbourhood. It stands as a profound, silent testament to how radically different the internal architecture of a gas giant is when compared to the dense, rocky terrestrial worlds huddling close to the warmth of the sun. Suspended high above the crushing unlit pressures of the planetary interior, immense swaths of ammonia ice crystals create a serene, banded tapestry across the entire globe. The extreme cold of the upper atmosphere freezes these volatile chemical compounds into delicate, highly reflective microscopic particles that beautifully catch the distant, muted sunlight. This continuous planetary scale freezing process results in alternating latitudinal bands of pale yellows, soft golds, and muted butterscotch hues that wrap seamlessly around the immense sphere. To any hypothetical observer approaching from the dark void, the visual effect is one of profound, undisturbed tranquility. These horizontal atmospheric stripes are visually far less chaotic than the violently turbulent swirling cloud belts visible on neighbouring gas giants. They project the convincing illusion of a quiet, dormant world resting peacefully in the frozen depths of the outer solar system. Every subtle variation in shading across the visible disk corresponds directly to a different altitude of these crystalline ammonia clouds, rising or falling within the frigid upper troposphere. This stunning golden exterior effectively acts as a magnificent unbroken veil, perfectly obscuring the volatile fluid dynamics churning ceaselessly just beneath the pastel surface. Beneath this calm and beautifully painted golden veneer, a hidden, terrifying violence dominates the upper troposphere in the form of entirely unstoppable equatorial winds. Driven relentlessly by a combination of the planet's exceptionally rapid rotation and its fierce internal heat engine, these atmospheric currents rush eastward at staggering supersonic speeds of over 1,000 miles per hour. This continuous atmospheric ferocity creates a massive equatorial jet stream that easily and consistently eclipses the destructive power of the most extreme hurricanes ever recorded on Earth. The sheer, unbridled kinetic energy contained within this impossibly fast-moving layer of gas is almost incomprehensible to human scales. It slices through the surrounding atmospheric layers with brutal efficiency, maintaining its immense velocity without ever encountering a landmass to disrupt its flow. Furthermore, the incredible breadth of this singular atmospheric current is staggering, stretching thousands of miles directly north and south of the geographic equator. Careful scientific observation of these high-velocity, eastward-flowing winds completely shatters the initial optical illusion of a peaceful, dormant exterior. The serene ammonia clouds are merely the uppermost visible markers of a chaotic environment caught permanently in the invisible grip of a howling perpetual tempest. Unlike the rugged rocky continents, deep ocean basins and towering mountain ranges of Earth, absolutely no solid surface exists here to ever halt or slow these endless gales. The thick atmosphere simply compresses progressively the deeper one descends, transitioning gradually from a frigid vapour into a dense, supercritical fluid without encountering any definitive, tangible boundary. This fundamental lack of planetary friction allows the raging storm systems and massive jet streams to wrap entirely around the planet in perpetual, completely uninterrupted ribbons of rushing gas. If a major storm vortex manages to form in this unimpeded environment, it can easily circle the entire globe for months or even consecutive years without ever losing its devastating momentum to terrestrial drag. These immense weather systems quickly become self-sustaining planetary-scale loops of kinetic energy. They feed continuously off the planet's internal heat generation, driving themselves relentlessly forward across the boundless spherical ocean of deep atmosphere. Such a deeply alien meteorological reality means that the entire upper layer of the gas giant acts as a completely frictionless, endless racetrack for violent atmospheric dynamics. It is a massive world fundamentally and entirely defined by its hostile skies, an environment where the very concept of solid ground is totally and irrevocably meaningless. Remarkably, the peculiar geometry of this massive world fiercely refuses to present itself as a perfect, mathematically precise cosmic sphere. The surprisingly extreme rotational speed of the gas giant physically flattens its overall physical shape, causing the vast equatorial region to bulge dramatically outward into a highly distinct oblate spheroid. A single, complete day in this alien environment flashes by in barely 10.5 hours, whipping the unimaginably massive volume of hydrogen and helium into a continuous dizzying spin. This unyielding, violent centrifugal force violently pushes the equatorial atmospheric layers thousands of miles further out into the vacuum of space than the gas currently residing at the flattened northern and southern poles. The resulting dramatic physical deformation of the globe is so extraordinarily pronounced that it is instantly and clearly visible even through the glass lenses of relatively modest, Earth-based optical telescopes. Because of its immense, isolating distance from the warmth of the inner solar system, celestial seasons here progress with a glacial, almost imperceptible slowness, stretching agonizingly for more than 7 Earth years each. As the massive planet lumbers heavily along its expansive, decades-long orbit, its pronounced axial tilt gradually exposes alternating hemispheres to the weak, distant rays of the sun. This painfully slow transition fundamentally alters the delicate chemical balance of the high-altitude smogs, shifting the hemisphere's overall tint from a cold, clear winter blue to a hazy summer gold. During the incredibly long, bitterly cold winter months, the significantly reduced ultraviolet sunlight allows the ubiquitous, obscuring yellow ammonia hazes to temporarily clear and dissipate. This seasonal clearing beautifully reveals deeper, methane-rich atmospheric layers that naturally scatter blue wavelengths of light back into the void. When the decade-long summer eventually returns, the slightly increased solar radiation triggers a profound photochemical reaction, baking the atmospheric gases back into their thick golden state. This vast, slow-motion, planet-wide colour change operates as one of the most majestic, visually striking atmospheric cycles currently observable in the known universe. It serves as a beautiful rhythmic clock, quietly ticking away the immensely long, solitary years in the frozen depths of the outer planetary realm. Deep within the dark, crushing, and utterly impenetrable lower atmospheric layers, a bizarre and continuous elemental precipitation occurs, completely unseen and unrecorded by human eyes. Microscopic, continuously falling droplets of dense, condensed helium rain steadily down through an incredibly vast, superheated ocean of liquid metallic hydrogen. This immense planet-wide drizzle generates a gentle, persistent internal frictional heat that successfully and slowly warms the massive planet entirely from the inside out. As the significantly heavier liquid helium slowly physically separates from the lighter ambient hydrogen, it inevitably sinks toward the unimaginable pressures of the planetary core. This constant inward migration effectively releases truly immense, unquantifiable amounts of stored gravitational potential energy into the surrounding fluid medium. This bizarre planet-wide internal rainstorm has been silently, continuously falling in the pitch blackness for billions of years, creating a hidden, high-pressure environment that utterly defies all standard terrestrial meteorological logic. The immense friction directly generated by these countless sinking elemental droplets acts as an incredibly powerful, entirely natural planetary dynamo. It continuously provides the massive thermal energy required to sustain and drive the fiercely violent supersonic weather systems easily observed thousands of miles above in the serene cloud tops. Without this internal shower, the gas giant would have rapidly cooled into a completely dormant, uninteresting sphere eons ago. This remarkably efficient hidden internal furnace causes the immense sphere to actively radiate significantly more than twice the thermal energy it actually receives from the weak, distant sun. Despite orbiting endlessly in an intensely frigid region of the outer solar system, where direct solar heating is strictly minimal, the entire planet glows fiercely across the invisible infrared spectrum. It effectively functions almost like a failed, smouldering star, continuously projecting its deeply generated warmth outward into the freezing, desolate vacuum of deep space. The immense heat constantly welling up from the deep helium rain, combined with the residual primordial energy left over from the planet's violently chaotic formation, strictly dictates the global weather. Such a massive energy imbalance ensures that the gas giant's atmospheric circulation is driven almost entirely from the deep interior, rather than from the sunlit surface as it is on Earth. Colossal convection currents carry this intense internal heat upward, violently boiling the upper atmospheric gases and continuously feeding the terrifying equatorial jet streams. If we were to peer closely into the darker, turbulent atmospheric bands, we would witness phenomenal lightning superbolts occasionally flashing deep within the intensely pressurized water clouds. These immense strikes instantaneously illuminate the surrounding dense gas with ghostly, fleeting and highly diffuse bursts of brilliant light. These magnificent electrical discharges are exponentially more powerful than the most severe thunderstorm ever experienced on Earth, tearing completely through the heavy atmospheric layers with an undeniably cataclysmic force. Because these incredibly violent flashes stubbornly occur hundreds of miles directly below the completely opaque yellow upper ammonia hazes, they most often appear to orbiting cameras as diffuse, haunting internal glows rather than distinctly recognizable jagged bolts. The immense static electricity ultimately responsible for these massive strikes is actively generated by the violent, continuous vertical churning of liquid water and solid ice deep within the hidden planetary interior. As chaotic convection cells push volatile moisture upwards and dense ice downwards, the molecular friction builds an enormous electrical charge. Radio sensors mounted on passing robotic spacecraft can easily detect the deafening, crackling static of these entirely hidden storms from millions of miles away. They actively translate the seemingly silent visual flashes into a terrifying audio symphony of sheer destruction. It remains a stark, dramatic reminder that unbridled violence constantly lurks just beneath the planet's otherwise placid exterior. Ultimately, when viewed from a comfortable astronomical distance through the lens of a telescope, the magnificent giant planet appears entirely peaceful, perfectly masking its violently chaotic atmospheric physics behind a deeply soft pastel facade. The subtle, flawlessly blended muted butterscotch bands and the perfectly uniform, dramatically oblate shape strongly suggest a dormant world of quiet contemplation, completely at rest in the freezing dark expanse of the outer solar system. It is a masterful, undeniably flawless planetary scale optical illusion that has successfully deceived countless human astronomers for centuries. Only through the incredibly daring proximity of intrepid robotic explorers and the relentless, unforgiving scrutiny of modern astrophysics have we finally been able to scientifically strip away this beautiful lying veil. We now know with absolute certainty that beneath the remarkably serene gold and pale yellow clouds lies a brutal, unrelenting realm comprised of supersonic winds, bone-crushing fluid pressures, and hidden electrical storms of unimaginable lethal fury. This profound, inescapable physical duality directly makes the massive gas giant one of the absolute most compelling and inherently deceptive physical objects currently orbiting our distant sun. It perfectly and silently encapsulates the quiet, inherently dangerous beauty of the wider cosmos, demonstrating clearly that the most terrifying environments are often elegantly wrapped in the most breathtakingly beautiful disguises. The most breathtakingly beautiful disguise of all extends far beyond the golden cloud tops, manifesting as a brilliant halo that defines the world's very identity. Countless pristine, icy particles shimmering like crushed glass in the distant sunlight form an architectural marvel unparalleled in our solar neighbourhood. This iconic ring system is composed almost entirely of pure crystalline water ice, completely devoid of the heavy rocky silicates that dominate terrestrial landscapes. Because this frozen water is so exceptionally clean and unpolluted by darker cosmic dust, it possesses an incredibly high reflectivity that acts as an immense circular mirror. When faint sunlight strikes this vast expanse of orbiting frost, nearly all the visible photons are bounced directly back into the dark void. It is this intense, blinding albedo that makes the halo so phenomenally bright and easily visible across unfathomable stretches of empty space. The radiant glow effectively acts as a majestic beacon, illuminating the pitch-black shadows cast by the massive planetary sphere itself. Despite spanning a staggering physical width that could comfortably fit the Earth, and our solitary lunar companion resting side by side, this magnificent structure is almost incomprehensibly flat. The main luminous bands are startlingly thin, often measuring less than a few paces from top to bottom across their entire massive circumference. If scaled down to the size of a typical city square, the physical thickness of this icy disk would be thinner than a solitary sheet of delicate writing paper. Such an extreme geometric ratio makes it the flattest known structure in the entire celestial neighbourhood by a massively wide margin. This bizarre pancake-like configuration is strictly enforced by relentless gravitational tides and continuous dampening collisions between the innumerable individual frozen fragments. Any wayward chunk of ice that dares to drift too far above or below the central orbital plane is quickly and violently knocked back into alignment. Viewing this immense disk perfectly edge-on from afar causes the entire formation to seemingly vanish into thin air, utterly invisible against the cosmic backdrop. Only when observed from a higher vantage point does the true, sprawling majesty of the expansive icy plains reveal itself to the wondering eye. Closer inspection reveals that this immense halo is not a unified solid sheet of frost, but rather a complex, deeply textured phonograph record of orbital mechanics. Multiple distinct primary sections organise the vast majority of the visible icy debris, cascading outward from the planet in zones of varying density and brightness. These primary regions create an awe-inspiring gradient of light and shadow, beautifully segmenting the expansive celestial disk into easily recognisable concentric tracks. The innermost of these primary zones presents as a deeply translucent ethereal band of dusty ice that fades gently into the upper atmosphere. Moving outward, the middle section dramatically commands attention as the absolute widest, densest, and most brilliantly opaque expanse of the entire system. Finally, the outermost primary boundary forms a slightly darker, sharply defined edge that perfectly frames the inner splendour against the surrounding blackness. Each specific zone possesses its own entirely unique character, dictated entirely by subtle variations in particle density and the specific gravitational interactions at play. They stand as beautifully ordered neighbourhoods of frost, silently sorting an unimaginable chaos of flying debris into elegant, perfect concentricity. As your breathing deepens and your physical body rests entirely supported by the surface beneath you, allow your mind's eye to drift toward the dark, striking void that interrupts this glowing architecture. A massive, seemingly empty gap suddenly severs the brilliant disk, separating the broadest and brightest icy tracks with a stark band of absolute blackness. This vast, dark corridor spans an immense distance across, creating a profound visual break in the otherwise continuous sheet of glittering frost. For generations, early astronomers peering through primitive lenses mistakenly believed this prominent dark stripe was a completely barren expanse devoid of any matter whatsoever. Modern robotic explorers, however, have conclusively proven that this shadowy divide is actually filled with an incredibly faint, diffuse mist of microscopic dark dust. The relative emptiness of this grand division is actively maintained by the invisible, rhythmic gravitational tugs of a distant, hidden orbital companion. This sheer physical scale of the dark gap forces the surrounding icy plains into a state of beautiful, isolated contrast. It is a majestic, sweeping canyon of shadow, carved directly into the brightest structure imaginable, highlighting the delicate balance between matter and the encroaching void. Zooming in closely on any specific segment of these luminous bands shatters the illusion of a smooth, continuous surface completely. The individual fragments making up this grand structure range drastically in size, forming a chaotic, tumbling blizzard of incredibly diverse icy shapes. A vast proportion of the halo consists of incredibly fine, microscopic dust grains that scatter light like a dense, freezing fog. Interspersed within this ethereal mist are an innumerable multitude of larger, highly reflective chunks, roughly the size of common pebbles, baseballs, and terrestrial boulders. Occasionally, truly massive floating mountains of solid ice emerge from the dusty haze, silently ploughing through the smaller debris like majestic frozen dreadnoughts. These hidden monoliths possess enough localized gravity to gently warp the surrounding particle tracks, leaving beautifully intricate trailing ripples in their wake. This staggering diversity in physical scale means that the local environment within the disk is a constantly shifting, highly textured wilderness of floating debris. It is a place where powdery frost permanently shares the exact same orbital lane with silent, tumbling glaciers of breathtaking proportion. Within this densely packed orbital highway, absolute stillness is a physical impossibility. Constant, remarkably gentle collisions between these innumerable frozen fragments create a slow, endless, and highly complex grinding dance. Because all neighbouring particles are travelling at roughly the exact same incredible orbital speed, their inevitable impacts are generally no more violent than a softly falling snowflake landing upon a winter landscape. These quiet, nudging encounters constantly transfer momentum back and forth, acting as a natural fluid dampener that actively prevents the material from ever clumping together into larger moons. The continuous soft bumping effectively smooths out the icy plains, enforcing the unimaginably thin vertical profile of the entire massive structure. It is a delicate, self-regulating mechanism of continuous destruction and immediate recreation playing out on a staggering astronomical scale. If an observer could somehow stand amidst this orbital blizzard, the surrounding environment would look like a deeply surreal slow-motion avalanche suspended in a weightless vacuum. The silent, eternal churning of the crystalline shards perpetually polishes the ice, keeping the reflective surfaces remarkably bright and freshly exposed to distant sunlight. Let the steady, rhythmic beating of your own resting heart anchor you as we consider the immense stretches of cosmic time shaping this environment. The pristine, sparkling purity of the water ice is under continuous silent assault from the deep cosmos itself. A relentless rain of tiny carbon-rich micrometeorites constantly bombards the entire system, drifting in from the darkest, furthest reaches of the outer solar neighbourhood. Whenever any individual speck of dark alien soot violently strikes a bright, tumbling glacier, it permanently embeds itself deeply into the frozen surface. Over the course of many successive epochs, this steady, invisible cosmic pollution acts to very slowly darken and stain the previously flawless crystalline architecture. The oldest sections of the disk appear distinctly muddier and more subdued in colour, carrying the heavy, accumulated grime of countless bygone eras. This slow, creeping degradation serves as a beautifully tragic reminder that nothing in the universe remains perfectly unblemished forever. The radiant halo is slowly losing its brilliant, blinding lustre, gradually fading into a deeper, more melancholic shade of dusty grey as the eras silently tick by. The innermost boundaries of this magnificent structure do not simply end abruptly in the vacuum of space, but rather bleed slowly to death. A steady, tragic drizzle of incredibly fine, microscopic, icy grains is constantly pulled away from the main disk by the overwhelming gravity of the gas giant below. This relentless celestial precipitation falls directly and silently into the upper reaches of the planet's wildly turbulent golden atmosphere. As these tiny, frozen refugees plunge into the increasingly dense layers of hydrogen and helium, they rapidly vaporize into completely invisible plumes of water gas. This continuous, delicate inward bleeding actively alters the chemical composition of the upper cloud tops, introducing complex molecules into an otherwise remarkably hostile, toxic environment. The invisible magnetic field lines of the host world actively guide this freezing rainfall, funneling it directly towards specific, highly charged latitudinal bands. Astrophysicists estimate that the sheer volume of this constant downpour could easily fill a vast multitude of terrestrial reservoirs every complete orbital rotation. It is a massive unidirectional conveyor belt of matter, slowly and methodically draining the glorious luminous halo of its precious sparkling lifeblood. despite dominating the visual profile of the planet and stretching across a truly incomprehensible volume of empty space, the physical substance of this structure is surprisingly lacking. If an entity were to magically sweep up every individual speck of dust, tumbling boulder and frozen mountain into a unified pile, the resulting sphere would be unexpectedly tiny. The absolute total mass of this profoundly magnificent halo is barely a diminutive fraction of the mass contained within our own solitary lunar companion. This shocking revelation highlights the supreme efficiency with which the universe can occasionally utilize incredibly sparse materials to construct overwhelmingly grandiose illusions. The entire brilliant planet-spanning disk is essentially nothing more than a highly localized, incredibly bright cosmic vapor. It possesses an optical footprint that vastly overstates its actual, tangible physical presence in the cold dark. Such an extreme lack of true substance renders the architecture incredibly fragile and highly susceptible to the subtle, gravitational whims of passing bodies. It is a fleeting, deeply delicate masterpiece of light and geometry, sculpted from scarcely more material than a localized terrestrial mountain range. Sink a little deeper into comfort, letting your muscles completely relax as we contemplate the fleeting, temporary nature of this breathtaking cosmic spectacle. Modern scientists now fiercely believe that these awe-inspiring icy structures are not permanent fixtures of the solar system, but rather a profoundly temporary, highly transient phenomenon. The overwhelming evidence suggests they were violently born from the tragic cataclysmic shredding of a deeply unfortunate icy moon that wandered far too close to the gas giant's crushing embrace. This spectacular orbital execution likely occurred incredibly recently on a geological timescale, long after the great prehistoric reptiles had already confidently roamed and vanished from the distant Earth. Immense gravitational tides simply ripped the solid satellite apart, smearing its frozen, shattered carcass into the beautifully flat, highly reflective disk we witness today. We are currently living in an incredibly special, highly privileged astronomical era, catching this magnificent golden sphere during a brief, spectacularly adorned phase of its long life. Eventually, the relentless inward rain and the dark, polluting cosmic dust will entirely consume and completely erase the glittering ice. When vast stretches of time finally pass, the giant world will inevitably return to its original, starkly unadorned state, leaving absolutely no trace of the radiant crown it once proudly wore. Even without its radiant crown of glittering ice, the massive world would not exist naked in the void, for it is permanently swathed in a vast, invisible armour of electromagnetism. A powerful, completely transparent magnetic bubble envelops the entire gas giant, projecting an incredibly strong protective barrier millions of miles out into the surrounding emptiness. This immense shield bravely deflects the harsh, continuous gale of charged solar wind racing outward from the distant sun, parting the lethal radiation like a ship's bow cuts through the sea. Because of this titanic, unseen architecture, the environment directly surrounding the planet is fundamentally insulated from the worst destructive furies of deep space. The bubble creates an immense, relatively tranquil safe harbour where the delicate inner moons can peacefully trace their orbits without being constantly blasted by stellar radiation. It is a silent, completely transparent fortress of pure physical force, diligently guarding the planetary neighbourhood from the chaotic weather of the wider solar system. To genuinely comprehend the true staggering scale of the planet, one must look past the visible atmosphere and acknowledge this massive, invisible magnetic domain extending far beyond the outermost icy debris. Strikingly, the internal geometry of this colossal, invisible force field presents a profound puzzle that continuously baffles the brightest minds in astrophysics. On almost every other planetary body equipped with a similar shield, the magnetic axis sits noticeably askew from the actual physical axis of rotation, much like a slightly crooked top. Here, however, The magnetic poles align almost perfectly with the geographic poles, creating an eerie, symmetrical perfection rarely seen in nature. Such a mathematically pure configuration strips away one of the primary methods scientists normally use to calculate a gas giant's true internal rotation rate. The perfect symmetry turns the invisible shield into a smooth, featureless cylinder, spinning in the dark, offering absolutely no distinguishing magnetic landmarks to track. As you settle deeper into your restful state, feeling the weight of your limbs softening against your support, turn your focus toward the extreme northern and southern horizons of the gas giant. There, crowning both flattened poles, brilliant ultraviolet auroras dance in majestic, continuous circular ribbons of ghostly light. These stunning polar lights are not merely localized phenomena, but rather massive planet-spanning rings of glowing plasma, hundreds of times more expansive than the most vivid auroral displays witnessed on Earth. While terrestrial auroras are primarily triggered directly by outbursts from the sun, this specific cosmic light show dances to a far more complex internal rhythm. The intensely rapid rotation of the massive planet actively drags its own magnetic field lines through the surrounding space, generating massive electrical currents that flow directly down into the polar atmosphere. Furthermore, volcanic material violently injected into the local vacuum by distant geologically active moons becomes trapped by these field lines, eventually crashing down onto the poles as well. The resulting display is a breathtaking, violently energetic collision between invisible magnetic forces and the uppermost layers of the frigid hydrogen atmosphere. The glowing ultraviolet crowns stand as a magnificent, radiant testament to the incredibly dynamic, deeply interconnected electrical environment silently dominating the entire planetary system. Surprisingly, the invisible interactions within this vast magnetic domain generate far more than just visual phenomena. They actively produce a haunting, continuous celestial broadcast. The planet endlessly emits a powerful, focused stream of kilometric radio waves, translating the violent electrical physics of its environment into a deeply strange rhythmic hum. This alien transmission sweeps silently across the dark vacuum of space, completely inaudible to human ears, but deafeningly loud to the delicate antennas of passing robotic spacecraft. The frequency and intensity of this ghostly cosmic broadcast shift and warble in a complex, eerie pattern, sounding remarkably like the mournful, sweeping calls of deep ocean whales. These radio emissions are primarily generated by the incredibly fast-moving charged particles, spiraling violently down the invisible magnetic field lines toward the polar auroras. The entire magnetosphere essentially functions as an immensely powerful, naturally occurring radio transmitter, constantly broadcasting its presence to the wider, listening cosmos. This continuous symphony of kilometric radiation serves as the true, energetic voice of the giant world. It is a completely alien song of raw physics, echoing endlessly out into the dark, silent reaches of the outer solar system. The deeply complex nature of this shifting radio signal creates a remarkably frustrating obstacle for astronomers trying to understand the planet's most basic physical properties. Because the immense world lacks a solid, observable surface, scientists must rely entirely on tracking the rotation of the magnetic field to determine the exact length of a single planetary day. However, the continuous warbling kilometric broadcast refuses to provide a steady, reliable metronome to measure against. The internal period of the radio emissions actively drifts and changes slightly over the passing years, slowing down and speeding up in a deeply confusing, entirely unpredictable manner. It is a profound mystery how a planet with such a massive, overwhelmingly powerful internal dynamo could seemingly alter its overall rotation rate on such a short human timescale. This strange variable broadcast makes it notoriously difficult, if not currently impossible, to nail down the precise moment when a single day officially begins or ends beneath the obscuring cloud tops. The giant sphere essentially keeps its true time perfectly hidden behind a wall of shifting, chaotic radio noise. It is a beautifully frustrating reminder that the universe rarely gives up its most fundamental secrets easily or straightforwardly. Breathe in slowly, filling your lungs with calm energy, and imagine the deeply strange invisible structures hiding within the vast dark expanse surrounding the world. A massive, completely unseen torus of highly charged, superheated plasma permanently encircles the planet, swirling in perfect tandem with the rigid magnetic field lines. This vast, donut-shaped cloud of electrified gas sits completely hidden from optical telescopes, yet profoundly influences the entire local electromagnetic environment. This colossal plasma ring is not inherently generated by the gas giant itself, but is instead continuously fed by the violent volcanic venting of smaller distant orbital companions. As these restless moons fiercely eject massive plumes of water vapour and rare gases into the frozen vacuum, the material is quickly stripped of its electrons by the harsh solar radiation. The resulting charged ions are immediately captured by the planet's sweeping magnetic broom, quickly populating the massive invisible torus with fresh, energetic material. The sheer physical scale of this hidden plasma structure is truly staggering, extending millions of miles outward from the upper atmosphere. It acts as a massive invisible ocean of electricity, actively connecting the fate of the geologically restless outer moons directly to the powerful magnetic heart of the central world. Deep within this invisible, swirling ocean of plasma, distinctly powerful radiation belts violently trap and accelerate highly energetic particles to incredibly dangerous speeds. These lethal, invisible zones are packed with fast-moving protons and electrons that would quickly destroy unprotected electronic circuitry or sensitive biological tissue. The intense, continuous funneling of these charged particles by the magnetic field creates extremely harsh, highly localized environments of extreme radiation near the equator. Fortunately, the brilliant icy architecture occupying the central orbital plane acts as a massive, highly effective physical shield against this dangerous trapped radiation. The innumerable tumbling frozen fragments efficiently absorb and neutralize a massive portion of the deadly particles, effectively scrubbing the inner environment completely clean. Passing inner moons also act like giant physical sponges, sweeping through the radiation belts and actively clearing wide, safe paths along their specific orbital tracks. This beautiful, dynamic interplay between the invisible magnetic forces and the tangible, icy debris creates a surprisingly complex geography of hazard and safety in the surrounding void. It highlights an intricate, delicate cosmic balance where the elegant frozen halo directly protects the inner sanctum from the lethal, invisible furies generated by the planet itself. If you listen very closely to the silent recordings of the kilometric broadcast, you will notice that the eerie, sweeping hum is not entirely continuous. Deeply profound, completely unexplained periods of absolute radio silence occasionally occur, acting like sudden, unexpected, quiet intervals in a very long, chaotic celestial symphony. Without any warning, the powerful planetary transmitter simply shuts down entirely, plunging the local electromagnetic environment into a state of sudden, eerie stillness. These bizarre, fleeting moments of quiet can last for several terrestrial days before the deafening, swirling static violently resumes without any obvious external trigger. Astrophysicists strongly suspect these sudden quiet periods are intimately connected to the complex, shifting dynamics of the solar wind pressing against the outer boundary of the protective bubble. When the external stellar pressure drops dramatically, the internal magnetic forces may temporarily reconfigure themselves, somehow instantly stifling the massive radio emissions. These mysterious intervals of complete silence serve to greatly deepen the enigma surrounding the planet's internal energetic engine. They represent massive, sudden pauses in the world's continuous song, moments where the giant simply stops broadcasting and quietly holds its breath in the dark. Allow the gentle rhythm of your own slow breathing to mirror the surprisingly dynamic, almost biological behavior of the vast magnetic domain surrounding the planet. The protective, invisible magnetosphere does not maintain a static, rigid boundary, but instead physically breathes in and out, constantly reacting to the changing mood of the distant sun. As the relentless pressure of the incoming solar wind naturally fluctuates, the immense magnetic bubble expands dramatically outward or contracts sharply inward in direct response. During periods of intense, violent stellar storms, the harsh solar gale forcefully compresses the front edge of the magnetic shield, pushing it violently back toward the delicate inner moons. Conversely, when the solar wind temporarily weakens into a gentle breeze, the planet's internal magnetic pressure quickly pushes outward, vastly expanding the protective bubble millions of miles further into deep space. This continuous rhythmic pumping action makes the entire electromagnetic structure behave very much like a massive invisible beating lung. This incredibly dynamic expansion and contraction vividly demonstrates that the gas giant is permanently locked in a deep, continuous physical wrestling match with the sun itself. Even across unfathomable icy distances, the invisible forces of the solar system remain intimately, violently connected in an eternal breathing dance. Amidst this eternal breathing dance of invisible forces, a physical structure of impossible geometry emerges at the crown of the world, defying every terrestrial rule of fluid motion. A massive and hauntingly persistent hexagonal wave pattern dominates the entire northern polar region, standing as a stationary sentinel amidst the swirling gases. This six-sided feature is not a mere trick of light or a fleeting cloud formation, but a gargantuan, self-sustaining atmospheric engine that has remained locked in place for decades. The sheer precision of the 6 equal sides and the sharp angles connecting them seems almost artificial to the human eye, yet it is a purely natural result of complex fluid dynamics on a planetary scale. It represents a harmonious synchronization between the planet's rapid rotation and the deep-seated thermal energy welling up from the interior. This geometric marvel provides a stable, unyielding framework for the most organized storm system discovered anywhere in the known solar system. As it sits at the absolute North Pole, it acts as a permanent crown for the golden sphere, perfectly centered over the axis of rotation. The hexagon remains one of the most mesmerizing sights in the cosmos, a place where the chaos of a gas giant's atmosphere finds a strange and beautiful mathematical order. It serves as a hauntingly still point in a world otherwise defined by supersonic turbulence and shifting vapors. To grasp the sheer, staggering scale of this atmospheric titan, one must look beyond the abstract geometry and consider the physical dimensions of its unyielding borders. Each of the 6 straight sides of this bizarre cloud formation is significantly wider than the entire diameter of the Earth itself. If our home planet were to be placed alongside one of these cloud walls, it would appear as a small, fragile marble overshadowed by a vast, towering cliff of swirling hydrogen. The total area enclosed by this geometric boundary is large enough to contain nearly 4 entire Earths, comfortably nestled within its sharp-angled embrace. This realization shifts the hexagon from a mere curiosity to an environment of terrifying proportions, where a single turn in the wind path covers thousands of miles of empty space. The structure is so immense that its sheer gravity and pressure influence the surrounding weather patterns across the entire northern hemisphere. This massive scale ensures that the forces required to maintain such a shape are equally astronomical in nature. It stands as a testament to the colossal energies at work within the gas giant, where features the size of entire worlds are sculpted by nothing more than moving gas and heat. The hexagon is not just a storm, it is a geographic feature made of wind, a continent-sized boundary that defines the northern limit of the world. Surprisingly, the universe has constructed this shape not as a spinning vortex, but as a permanent stationary wave that effectively steers the polar jet stream along an incredibly precise path. While the gases within the stream are moving at terrifying velocities, the shape itself remains fixed in place relative to the planet's internal rotation, acting as a ghostly, rigid track in the sky. This structure operates through a delicate balance of atmospheric pressure, where the fast-moving current is forced to bend at specific intervals to maintain the geometric equilibrium. As you feel your breath becoming steady and slow, notice how the air around you moves in a simple, effortless cycle compared to these complex cosmic currents. This stationary wave effectively traps the polar atmosphere, creating a distinct boundary that prevents the mixing of gases between the pole and the lower latitudes. It creates a secluded geometric sanctuary at the top of the world, where the chemistry of the atmosphere can evolve independently from the rest of the planet. The jet stream follows this hexagonal track, with a mathematical fidelity that seems to defy the inherent randomness of weather. It is a masterpiece of fluid architecture, demonstrating how a simple flow of gas can be transformed into a rigid, geometric cage through the sheer force of planetary physics. This unseen hand of gravity and rotation guides every molecule of the polar wind with an unwavering eternal discipline. If we were to look closer at the absolute geometric centre of this six-sided enclosure, a monstrous and deep red hurricane reveals its terrifying eye to the void. This central vortex is a separate, localised storm of incredible power, pinned perfectly to the North Pole by the surrounding hexagonal walls. The eye of this crimson tempest is estimated to be 50 times larger than that of any terrestrial hurricane, spanning a width that could easily swallow entire countries. The deep red hue of the cloud suggests a complex chemical makeup, where heavy molecules from deep within the atmosphere are dredged up and processed by the intense sunlight. Within this gargantuan eye, the air is remarkably clear, offering a window down into the darker, higher pressure layers of the planet's interior. Around the edges of this calm centre, the eye wall rages with a fury that dwarfs any storm known to human history. This red hurricane acts as the heart of the polar system, a dark and spinning core that anchors the entire hexagonal structure. It is a place of absolute concentrated energy, where the planet's internal heat finds a direct path to the freezing vacuum of space. The contrast between the deep red of the central eye and the pale gold of the surrounding hexagon creates a striking visual that looks like a giant staring eye at the top of the world. Deep within the shifting chemistry of the polar heights, the entire hexagonal system undergoes a profound, decades-long metamorphosis of colour that follows the slow rhythm of the seasons. During the long, frigid years of winter, the hexagon takes on a cold, hazy azure blue tint, reflecting a period of reduced sunlight and different chemical concentrations. As the 7-year spring progresses and the sun rises higher in the polar sky, the atmosphere undergoes a photochemical transformation, slowly baking the blue haze into a bright golden yellow. This colour shift is the result of sunlight breaking down methane and other hydrocarbons, creating a thick, smog-like layer that covers the geometric pattern. The transition is so complete that the entire North Pole appears to change its identity as the planet lumbers through its 30-year orbit around the Sun. It is a visual signal of the massive energy exchange taking place between the distant star and the gas giant's upper atmosphere. The hexagon acts as a giant chemical laboratory, where the changing intensity of ultraviolet light creates a predictable rhythmic cycle of transformation. This slow-motion shift of colour is one of the most dramatic seasonal changes in the solar system, turning the northern crown from a frost-coloured jewel into a burnished gold shield. It reminds us that even at these immense distances, the sun remains the ultimate artist, painting the clouds with a celestial brush of radiation. This structure is far from a static image, as the winds screaming along the perimeter of the shape consistently exceed 200 miles per hour in a relentless display of kinetic power. These supersonic currents form the boundaries of the hexagon, moving with a ferocity that would instantly flatten any structure ever built by human hands. As the weight of your body presses into the surface beneath you, think of the absolute absence of such resistance in the thin, high-altitude air of the North Pole. The wind doesn't just blow, it shears through the surrounding atmosphere, creating a distinct friction that generates heat and turbulence along the geometric edges. This high-velocity flow is what keeps the hexagon sharp, as the momentum of the gas resists any attempt by the surrounding atmosphere to blur the straight lines. The energy required to move such a massive volume of gas at these speeds is provided by the planet's rapid rotation and the warmth rising from the core. These perimeter winds act as the physical walls of the hexagon, creating a barrier that is as effective as a mountain range made of stone. The jet stream is a river of energy, flowing forever in a six-sided loop that never falters and never slows. It is a perpetual motion machine of the atmosphere, a screaming torrent of hydrogen that defines the boundary between the polar calm and the mid-latitude chaos. While it appears as a surface pattern to our telescopes, this precise formation is actually the top of a massive atmospheric column, extending hundreds of miles down into the dense layers of the gas giant. The hexagon is not a thin film of clouds, but a deep-seated structure that reaches into regions of immense pressure and heat, far below the visible surface. It is as if a six-sided cookie cutter has been pressed deep into the planet's atmosphere, shaping the gas into a geometric pillar that spans the entire troposphere. This vertical extent means that the forces creating the hexagon are not merely surface phenomena, but are rooted in the fundamental fluid dynamics of the planet's deep interior. The column of air rotates as a single, unified unit, maintaining its six-sided shape even as the density and temperature of the gas change dramatically with depth. Probes descending into this region would find themselves encased in a geometric world of wind that remains consistent for hundreds of miles. Such depth explains why the hexagon is so remarkably stable and resistant to change, as it is anchored by the sheer mass of the atmosphere beneath it. It is a skyscraper of gas, a monumental architectural feature of the planet that is carved from the very substance of the world. The hexagon is a three-dimensional marvel, a hollow pillar of wind that connects the frozen heights to the scorching depths. Curiously, the planet's symmetry breaks at its opposite extremity, where the southern pole lacks this geometric marvel entirely, featuring instead a perfectly circular eye-like vortex. This striking asymmetry between the two poles is one of the great mysteries of planetary science, as one would expect identical forces to produce identical shapes at both ends of the axis. While the North Pole is defined by sharp angles and straight lines, the South Pole is a realm of smooth curves and a singular centered storm that resembles a terrestrial hurricane. This southern vortex is equally massive and powerful, but it lacks the stationary wave that forces the northern jet stream into a hexagonal path. The reasons for this difference likely lie in the subtle variations of the planet's internal heat flow, or the influence of the rings on the southern hemisphere's atmospheric circulation. It creates a world of two halves, one crowned by a mathematical hexagon, and the other by a classic spiraling eye. The absence of the hexagon in the south highlights how delicate the conditions must be to create such a geometric shape in a fluid environment. It reminds us that the northern feature is a rare and special occurrence, a perfect alignment of physics that has not been replicated elsewhere. The planet is a study in contrasts, a giant sphere that presents two completely different faces to the stars at its poles. This six-sided storm has been churning with unyielding consistency since at least the era when the Voyager spacecraft first captured its strange profile in the early 1980s. For more than 4 decades, the hexagon has remained a permanent fixture of the northern landscape, surviving countless seasonal shifts and internal atmospheric upheavals. As your muscles continue to relax and the tension leaves your frame, imagine a storm that has lasted longer than a human generation without ever losing its shape. While weather on Earth is measured in days and weeks, the weather of the gas giant operates on a timescale of centuries. The persistence of the hexagon suggests that it is a fundamental part of the planet's atmospheric architecture, a feature as permanent as a mountain on a rocky world. It has seen the arrival and departure of multiple robotic explorers, remaining a constant landmark in an ever-changing sea of clouds. This longevity proves that the hexagon is not a freak occurrence or a temporary disturbance, but a stable state of the northern atmosphere. It is an eternal storm, a geometric ghost that haunts the pole and refuses to fade away. It stands as a symbol of the immense stability that can be found within the heart of a chaotic gas giant. Smaller, transient vortices frequently spawn along the inner and outer edges of the hexagon, rolling through the atmosphere like crystalline ball bearings along a celestial track. These mini-storms are caught in the powerful shear between the fast-moving jet stream and the slower-moving surrounding air, causing them to spin rapidly as they are carried along the geometric boundary. They act as the ball bearings of the atmosphere, reducing the friction between the different layers of gas and helping to maintain the sharp angles of the larger shape. These vortices are often short-lived, appearing as small white or dark spots that dance around the perimeter before being absorbed back into the main flow. Their movement provides a sense of the incredible kinetic energy flowing through the system, showing that the hexagon is a dynamic and living structure. The interaction between these small storms and the main jet stream creates an intricate, swirling embroidery along the edges of the 6 sides. This complex interplay of scales, from the planet-sized hexagon to the city-sized vortices, demonstrates the fractal nature of atmospheric motion. It is a beautiful and intricate dance of wind, where every small movement contributes to the stability of the grand geometric design. The hexagon is never truly alone, but is always accompanied by this retinue of rolling, spinning companions that help it navigate the polar dark. Navigating away from the polar dark and into the brilliant clarity of the surrounding void, we encounter a world that shines with an impossible light. Beyond the shadows of the gas giant, a small and incredibly brilliant moon orbits like a polished diamond suspended in the deep freeze of space. This tiny world possesses such a high degree of reflectivity that it bounces nearly 100% of the sunlight hitting its surface back into the cosmos. It stands as the most reflective object in our solar system, appearing as a blindingly white beacon against the dark velvet of the background stars. Unlike the dusty, crater-scarred surfaces of many other satellites, this moon is essentially a giant, flawless mirror made of freshly fallen snow. This extreme brightness is caused by a continuous coat of pristine ice particles that settle upon the surface from above, burying any ancient terrain under a blanket of white. To an observer standing on its plains, the landscape would be an overwhelming expanse of pure white radiance, casting almost no deep shadows and reflecting the distant sun with a terrifying intensity. The surface is so clean and pure that it seems to exist outside of time, resisting the darkening influence of cosmic dust through its own active processes. It serves as a striking contrast to the golden, hazy world it circles, a brilliant and silent point of purity in the outer solar system. Deep within the southern polar region, the flawless white crust is violently interrupted by a series of massive parallel fissures that stretch across the landscape. These jagged scars, affectionately nicknamed tiger stripes by the astronomers who first witnessed them, run for hundreds of miles across the frozen crystalline plains. They represent deep, active tectonic wounds where the icy shell has been pulled apart by internal forces, revealing the volatile interior of the moon to the cold vacuum. Each of these fractures is flanked by ridges of displaced ice, testifying to the immense geological pressure grinding beneath the surface of the moon. The walls of these deep canyons are painted with a subtle electric blue tint, providing a stark and beautiful contrast to the brilliant white of the surrounding terrain. These are not merely ancient cracks, but the active breathing pores of the world where the moon's internal pressure finds a violent and rhythmic release. These tiger stripes are the primary gateways between the hidden depths and the starry sky, marking the location of an immense thermal engine. They scar the South Pole with a geometric regularity that hints at a global, underlying structure of stress and release. Through these vents, the moon communicates its secret vitality to the rest of the solar system, providing a direct link to a liquid heart that should not exist. From these deep and blue-tinted fissures, continuous and magnificent geysers erupt into the darkness, shooting vast plumes of water vapor and sparkling ice crystals hundreds of miles into space. These silent eruptions are driven by the immense pressure of a hidden sea, forcing matter through the narrow gaps in the crust with relentless and frightening power. The result is a shimmering curtain of frozen mist that hangs permanently above the South Pole, catching the weak sunlight and glowing like a celestial ghost. Surprisingly, these geysers do not behave like the thunderous eruptions of Earth, as they occur in a total vacuum that allows the fine particles to travel in graceful ballistic arcs. The plumes are so expansive that they can be seen from millions of miles away by passing spacecraft, appearing as a soft, luminous tail trailing behind the small world. This constant venting creates a bridge of matter between the Moon and the wider planetary environment, a permanent exhaled breath of liquid water into the void. If we were to look closer at the base of these plumes, we would see a chaotic and energetic environment where liquid water flashes instantly into ice and vapor. This is a landscape of perpetual motion, where the very substance of the world is being thrown into the stars in a silent, beautiful display of force. The geysers are the visible heartbeat of a world that refuses to remain frozen, acting as a constant fountain of life-giving water in the desert of space. Notice the quietude of your own resting body as you drift through this icy mist, feeling the weight of the day settle into the surface beneath you. These massive erupting plumes do not simply dissipate into nothingness, but rather provide the raw material that forms the diffuse and expansive E-ring surrounding the parent planet. Most of the icy debris ejected from the southern fissures escapes the Moon's weak gravity entirely, settling into a wide, ghostly orbit that creates a massive band of frost. The tiny Moon effectively acts as a celestial fountain, continuously replenishing this vast and ethereal halo with fresh, microscopic grains of water ice. Without the tireless activity of these geysers, the E-ring would slowly fade and vanish over time, starved of the icy particles that give it its ghostly form. It is a profound realization that a structure spanning millions of miles is maintained by the active heartbeat of a moon no larger than a terrestrial state. This interconnectedness demonstrates how the smallest of worlds can leave a permanent, shimmering mark on the architecture of the entire solar neighborhood. The moon is the architect of its own orbital surroundings, painting the sky with the frozen remnants of its internal life. Every sparkling particle in the E-ring was once a drop of water, trapped deep within the moon's dark, silent heart, proving that the planet's rings are a living, breathing part of the system. Hidden beneath this frozen and fractured shell lies a global liquid water ocean that encompasses the entire world in a dark and pressurized embrace. While the surface remains a realm of absolute zero, the interior remains surprisingly warm and fluid, kept in a liquid state by the intense heat generated by tidal friction. As the moon travels along its elliptical path, the immense gravity of the nearby gas giant and its sister moons stretches and squeezes the small body with rhythmic regularity. This continuous internal flexing generates immense frictional heat within the rocky core, preventing the deep waters from ever freezing solid despite the distance from the sun. This hidden sea is estimated to be many miles deep, potentially containing more liquid water than all of Earth's oceans combined into a single, lightless volume. It is a vast sanctuary, protected from the harsh radiation of the outer solar system by a protective crust of ice several miles thick. The existence of such a massive reservoir so far from the solar hearth challenges our fundamental understanding of where life-sustaining environments can be found in the universe. It suggests that heat can come from within, born of gravity and motion rather than the light of a distant star. Beneath the blindingly white plains, a world of liquid darkness waits in total, eternal silence, holding the potential for a history entirely independent of our own. Deep at the very bottom of this alien ocean, where the dark water meets the rocky core, active hydrothermal vents pump heat and minerals into the pressurized depths. These vents are remarkably similar to the volcanic chimneys found along the mid-ocean ridges of Earth, acting as conduits for the moon's internal energy. They release a chemical-rich soup of minerals and heat into the surrounding sea, creating localized environments of extreme activity within the otherwise cold abyss. The presence of these vents implies that the moon's interior is geologically alive and chemically active, providing a constant source of energy that does not depend on sunlight. This internal heat circulation drives the massive plumes observed at the surface, pushing enriched water up through the crustal cracks in a continuous planetary cycle. It creates a dynamic system where heat and matter are constantly exchanged between the core and the outer vacuum. This hidden volcanic activity turns the tiny moon into a thriving, energetic world that defies its frozen exterior and isolated location. It is a place where the fire of the core meets the water of the deep, creating the perfect conditions for a complex chemical dance. In this lightless realm, the energy of the tides is transformed into the energy of life, fueling a world that never sees the sun. Samples of the plumes captured by robotic sensors have revealed the presence of salts, silica, and complex organic molecules drifting through the vacuum of space. These are the signature ingredients of a salty, mineral-rich ocean that has spent billions of years interacting with a rocky volcanic seabed. The silica particles in particular provide direct evidence of high-temperature reactions occurring deep within the moon's dark, watery interior. As you remain still and supported, consider the complex molecules dancing within these icy sprays, far more intricate than simple water. Finding these organic building blocks suggests that the hidden sea is not merely water, but a complex chemical environment rich with the prerequisites for biological processes. These molecules are not being synthesized in the void, but are being dredged up from the seafloor and delivered directly to our doorstep for analysis. It is as if the moon is actively offering up its deepest secrets, spraying the contents of its internal laboratory into the void for us to analyze. Each icy grain becomes a tiny capsule of information, carrying the chemical history of an alien world across the silence of the solar system. This discovery has transformed the moon from a simple satellite into a primary target for the study of astrochemistry and the origins of life. The southern hemisphere of this small world acts as a massive thermal anomaly, radiating significantly more heat than the equator or the northern pole. Despite receiving the least amount of sunlight during certain parts of its orbit, the South Pole is the warmest place on the moon, glowing with internal energy. This localized hotspot is centered precisely over the tiger stripes, indicating that the heat is coming directly from the tectonic activity and geysers below. The amount of energy escaping from this polar region is far higher than what could be produced by simple radioactive decay, pointing toward the immense power of tidal forces. This heat flow is what keeps the fissures open and allows the geysers to erupt with such relentless and predictable consistency across the eras. It creates a stark contrast between the frigid northern plains and the geologically feverish southern pole, making the moon a world of lopsided energy. As the moon travels along its elliptical orbit, the varying distance from the massive parent planet causes its physical body to undergo extreme gravitational squeezing. This rhythmic tidal force physically compels the tiger stripes to open and close like a set of celestial lungs, breathing water into the void. During the part of the orbit where the moon is furthest away, the fractures pull apart, allowing the geysers to reach their peak intensity and spray more matter. If we were to look closer at the fissures during this transition, we would see the ice walls moving by several feet in response to the invisible pull of gravity. When the moon swings closer to the gas giant, the immense gravity pulls the crust back together, partially sealing the vents and reducing the flow of the plumes. This mechanical pumping action is the heartbeat of the world, a physical response to the invisible tug of the surrounding celestial bodies. Notice how the rhythm of your own breath can align with this massive orbital cycle of expansion and contraction. It ensures that the plumbing of the internal ocean remains clear and active, preventing the fissures from being choked by the freezing surface ice. This orbital cycle turns the entire moon into a living, breathing machine of ice and water, driven by the clockwork of the heavens. This tiny dynamic world currently stands as one of the most promising locations in the entire universe to search for extraterrestrial microbial life. It possesses all the essential ingredients: liquid water, an energy source from hydrothermal vents, and the complex organic chemistry required to build living cells. Unlike other ocean worlds that remain locked behind impenetrable shells, this moon conveniently sprays its internal environment directly into space for easy sampling. The accessibility of the plumes makes it a prime target for future missions that could potentially detect the metabolic waste products of alien organisms. Within the dark, warm waters of its hidden sea, life may have already found a foothold, thriving in the chemical-rich shadows of the hydrothermal vents. It is a profound realization that a small, frozen moon in the outer solar system might hold the answer to one of humanity's oldest and deepest questions. This world reminds us that life is not limited to sunlit surfaces, but can flourish in the most unexpected and isolated corners of the cosmos. As you drift toward a deeper state of relaxation, carry with you the image of this sparkling white world shooting its secrets into the stars. It is a silent, icy sanctuary that may be teeming with the tiny invisible fire of life, waiting to be discovered in the darkness. Emerging from that profound darkness of the inner moons, we encounter a massive satellite that wears its own sky like a heavy golden cloak of mystery. This world is a true giant among companions, possessing a physical scale that comfortably dwarfs the planet Mercury and rivals the primary gas giants in its sheer complexity. Most strikingly, it stands as the only moon in our entire solar system to host a substantial and dense atmosphere, a feature that makes it feel more like a sister planet to Earth than a mere rocky satellite. This opaque amber shroud is so thick and all-encompassing that it completely hides the landscape from the prying eyes of distant optical telescopes. It serves as a protective, pressurized cocoon, insulating the frozen surface from the harsh, cold vacuum of space while trapping the faint heat from within. To witness this world is to see a vibrant orange orb suspended in the blackness, a mystery wrapped in a smoggy, sunlit veil that stubbornly refuses to reveal its secrets to those who watch from afar. This massive atmospheric achievement transforms the moon into a premier laboratory for the study of complex physics and celestial chemistry. It represents a monumental departure from the airless, crater-scarred rocks typically found in the outer reaches, offering instead a world defined by wind, pressure, and weather. It is a place where the boundaries between moon and planet are forever blurred, creating a destination that feels both hauntingly familiar and deeply alien. This pervasive chemical haze creates a permanent smoggy twilight that hangs heavy over every frozen valley and jagged mountain range. It is an environment of rich organic potential, where the air itself is filled with the fundamental building blocks of complex biological chemistry. If we were to attempt to breathe this air, we would find it cold beyond comprehension, yet chemically alive with a prehistoric energy that mimics the early, raw conditions of our own world. Surprisingly, this pervasive amber tint is not merely a visual curiosity, but a fundamental driver of the moon's entire thermal character. It acts as a selective filter, allowing certain long-wave infrared radiation to pass through, while trapping others in a complex alien greenhouse effect. The air is a thick chemical soup, a dense and hazy reservoir of matter that defines the very essence of this unique and perpetually shadowed world. The surface pressure in this shadowed realm is 50% greater than that of Earth, making the surrounding air feel remarkably thick and heavy to any visitor. As you rest now, notice the subtle sensation of your own weight pressing into the surface beneath you, imagining that same pressure amplified by the weight of a towering orange sky. This increased density means that the air is heavy enough to offer significant physical resistance to movement, almost behaving like the shallow, supportive waters of a warm swimming pool. A human explorer walking through this thick atmosphere would find it surprisingly easy to gain lift, especially given the moon's relatively low gravitational pull. If one were to attach simple, lightweight wings to their arms, the dense nitrogen air would provide enough buoyant force to allow for effortless, bird-like flight through the amber twilight. It is a world where the very act of moving through the sky would feel graceful and slow, a rhythmic glide through a supportive heavy mist. This crushing atmospheric weight ensures that the surface remains relatively calm, as the heavy air resists sudden, violent changes in temperature and pressure. It creates a stable, muffled environment where sound would travel with an unusual resonant clarity across the vast and frozen plains. The pressure is a constant physical presence, a comforting and heavy embrace from a world that holds its atmosphere with an iron, gravitational grip. A complete and complex hydrological cycle exists across this alien landscape, but it utilizes liquid methane and ethane instead of the familiar waters of Earth. Because the temperatures here are so intensely cold, the methane that exists as a flammable gas in our homes transforms into a clear liquid that carves deep rivers and feeds expansive lakes. This bizarre weather system creates massive clouds that periodically darken the sky and release intense downpours of chilled natural gas onto the frozen plains below. These methane raindrops are significantly larger than those on Earth, falling in a slow, hypnotic and rhythmic fashion through the dense and heavy air. They wash over the landscape with a gentle force, eroding the icy mountains and transporting dark organic sediments into the low-lying coastal basins. The resulting scenery is one of sculpted valleys and winding riverbeds that look eerily similar to terrestrial maps, yet are governed by an entirely different set of liquid laws. Notice how the simple cycle of rain and evaporation on our world creates a sense of life and renewal, and then imagine that same cycle performed by a clear, oily liquid in the outer dark. It is a profound realization that the fundamental mechanics of weather are universal, even if the materials involved are radically different. This methane cycle is the lifeblood of the moon, a continuous and rhythmic movement of liquid that shapes every inch of its ancient frozen surface. Vast and dark seas of liquid natural gas dominate the northern polar regions, creating a seascape of mirror-still surfaces and oily, shimmering horizons. The most famous of these bodies, known as Kraken Mare, is an immense reservoir of methane and ethane that rivals the Great Lakes of Earth in its scale and depth. These are not turbulent, wave-tossed waters, but deep and silent pools that reflect the orange sky with a perfect liquid clarity that defies description. Surprisingly, the unique chemistry of these seas may offer an environment for exotic forms of life that do not require liquid water to survive. They represent a massive liquid habitat that is fundamentally different from anything else currently known in our planetary neighbourhood. Standing on the shore of such a sea, one would witness a world of cold, dark, natural gas stretching out to an amber horizon, a silent and alien ocean at the edge of the universe. The fundamental bedrock of this alien landscape is not composed of silicon or rock, but of ordinary water ice frozen so hard that it behaves like granite. At the staggering temperatures of the outer solar system, water ice loses its slippery, transient nature and becomes a rigid structural material capable of supporting massive mountains and deep canyons. If you were to strike this surface with a hammer, it would ring with the metallic sound of solid stone rather than the dull thud of snow. As you feel the solidity of your own resting place, consider a world where the very substance we drink is the mountain beneath your feet. This icy crust serves as the foundation for all the geological wonders of the moon, providing a durable shell that holds the weight of the dense atmosphere and the liquid seas. It is an ancient and unyielding surface, scarred by impact craters and carved by the slow erosion of methane rivers over millions of years. Deep within this frozen bedrock, there are likely complex layers of different ices and salts, reflecting a long and active geological history. The surface is often coated in a fine layer of organic soot, but beneath that dust lies a world of pure crystalline ice that forms the skeletal structure of the moon. It is a place where the familiar becomes exotic and where the most basic substance of life is transformed into the indestructible bone of the planet. Equatorial regions of this moon are covered in towering linear dunes made of organic, plastic-like sand that has been meticulously sculpted by gentle and persistent winds. These massive structures, some rising hundreds of feet into the amber sky, stretch for miles across the dark deserts in perfectly parallel rows. Unlike the quartz sand found on Earth, this sand is composed of tiny grains of solid hydrocarbons that have settled out of the smoggy atmosphere over countless ages. These organic grains possess a soft, slightly waxy texture, behaving more like pulverized plastic than the jagged grit of a terrestrial desert. They are easily moved by the thick and heavy air, flowing in slow-motion waves that follow the rhythmic patterns of the moon's subtle atmospheric tides. This creates a landscape of dark, undulating ridges that look like the surface of a frozen velvet ocean, shimmering with a dull luster in the dim sunlight. This structure of organic dunes covers a massive portion of the moon's middle latitudes, forming a vast and silent wilderness of hydrocarbon sand. It is a place of absolute windswept isolation, where the only sound is the soft rustle of plastic grains shifting in the breeze. These dunes represent the ultimate destination for the complex chemistry of the sky, a final resting place for the amber dust that defines this entire world. Occasionally, the long and slow-moving seasons trigger massive monsoons that darken the equatorial deserts with intense and overwhelming methane downpours. These storms are rare, occurring perhaps once every 30 Earth years, but they bring a sudden and violent transformation to the otherwise dry and sandy plains. The sky turns a deep, bruised purple as massive methane clouds gather, eventually releasing torrents of liquid that flash flood the ancient riverbeds and wash over the plastic dunes. As you continue to breathe in a steady and relaxed rhythm, imagine the arrival of such a storm after decades of absolute drought. The sound of heavy methane drops striking the waxy dunes would be a resonant and rhythmic drumming, an alien music that signals the changing of the seasons. These monsoons are the primary sculptors of the equatorial landscape, ensuring that the ancient riverbeds remain clear and the organic sand is constantly redistributed. Deep beneath the frozen crust, immense pressures occasionally force a strange and cold form of volcanic activity to erupt onto the surface. These cryovolcanoes do not spew molten rock or fire, but instead release a thick, slushy lava composed of liquid water, ammonia, and ice. This freezing magma flows slowly across the landscape, filling in ancient craters and repaving the surface with a fresh and pristine layer of white ice that stands out against the dark plains. One such feature, a massive mountain known as Sotra Patera, shows clear evidence of having erupted multiple times in the recent geological past. These eruptions are driven by the same tidal forces that heat the inner oceans, creating a dynamic system where the moon's internal warmth occasionally breaks through the icy shell. The result is a landscape of volcanic peaks and frozen lava flows that look remarkably like the basalt fields of Earth, yet are composed of materials that would melt at room temperature. Notice the profound stillness of your own body as you consider these slow-motion eruptions occurring in the absolute silence of the outer solar system. It is a world where the internal fire is actually a liquid sea, and where a volcanic eruption is a freezing event that creates new land from the depths. These cryovolcanoes are the primary recycling mechanism of the moon, bringing fresh material from the interior to the surface and keeping the world geologically alive. In a historic moment of human exploration, a small robotic probe famously touched down on a damp, sandy floodplain after a long and drifting descent through the amber haze. As the parachute released and the probe settled onto the surface, it revealed a landscape strewn with rounded ice pebbles that had been smoothed by the action of ancient methane rivers. The ground was not dry, but possessed the consistency of wet clay or damp sand, indicating that liquid methane was present just beneath the surface. The probe captured the first ever sounds of the moon's wind and the first clear images of its hidden mountains and winding river channels. It sat in the orange twilight for several hours, transmitting data back to Earth until its batteries finally succumbed to the intense, freezing cold of the alien night. To see those first images was to witness a world that looked hauntingly like our own, a familiar shoreline at the edge of a vast and alien wilderness. If we were to look closer at the landing site today, we would find a small, frozen monument of human ingenuity resting peacefully in the organic dust. It stands as a silent witness to our curiosity, a lonely messenger that bridged the vast distance between our blue world and this amber moon. The probe's final resting place is a testament to the fact that even the most distant and hostile environments can be understood, and that the universe is a place filled with familiar wonders waiting to be discovered in the darkness. The shepherd moons and ring sculptors. Sensory focus. Tiny potato-shaped rocks gently weaving through vast, dusty tracts of ice, leaving intricate ripples in their wake. These familiar wonders waiting to be discovered in the darkness often manifest as tiny potato-shaped sentinels that tirelessly patrol the periphery of the most complex structures. Deep within the outer reaches of the main system, two small moonlets known as Prometheus and Pandora act as dedicated shepherds for the narrow and enigmatic F-ring. They orbit on either side of this thin ribbon of debris, using their subtle gravitational influence to herd stray icy particles back into a tightly confined band. Without this constant rhythmic tugging, the F-ring would quickly lose its coherent shape and bleed out into the surrounding vacuum. The inner moon, Prometheus, pulls particles forward and inward, while its outer companion Pandora pushes them back, creating a delicate braided appearance that looks like a strand of cosmic hair. This gravitational herding ensures that the ring remains one of the most dynamic and well-defined features in the entire planetary architecture. It is a beautiful mechanical demonstration of how small bodies can govern the behaviour of vast collections of matter through invisible force. These tiny guardians are the primary sculptors of their immediate environment, proving that even a small amount of mass can create profound order in a chaotic field of debris. Their eternal orbit is a silent, shifting dance of containment and discipline. Within the sprawling expanses of the A-ring, a seemingly empty lane known as the Enki Gap serves as a pristine, cleared highway in the sky. This structure is kept remarkably free of icy debris by the constant, sweeping presence of a small moon named Pan, which possesses a bizarre, flattened shape resembling a celestial ravioli. As it orbits entirely within the gap, the moon's gravity acts as a powerful cosmic broom, attracting any wandering particles and either incorporating them or flinging them into the nearby ring edges. Surprisingly, this little world features a prominent equatorial ridge that gives it its distinct disc-like appearance, likely formed by the slow accumulation of fine dust over millions of years. This extra layer of material has been gathered directly from the very gap it helps to maintain, turning the moon into a physical record of its own orbital labour. The moon effectively carves its own path through the frozen sea, ensuring that the gap remains a sharp, dark line against the bright surroundings. If we were to look closer, we would see the tiny moonlet acting as a focal point for the surrounding ring dynamics, creating localized disturbances that ripple outward like the wake of a ship. It is a lonely, productive existence, a small rock single-handedly maintaining a void miles wide. This ravioli-shaped world stands as a primary example of a moon in the gap, a specialized architect of the planetary halo. Deep in the Keeler Gap, another tiny sculptor named Daphnis performs a visual miracle that completely transforms our understanding of the rings as a flat structure. As this small moonlet passes through its narrow channel, its gravity kicks up vertical waves of ice along the ring edges that rise and fall like giant frozen peaks. These three-dimensional ripples can reach heights of several miles, towering far above the otherwise paper-thin sheet of the surrounding icy plains. As you feel your body becoming heavy and still, supported by the quiet surface beneath you, think of these vertical mountains of ice shimmering in the distant sunlight. The waves are temporary, cresting as the moon passes and then slowly settling back into the flat plane of the disk through the dampening force of collisions. This rhythmic upheaval creates a beautiful serrated edge along the gap, a direct visual consequence of the moon's gravitational signature. This interaction proves that the rings are a living, responsive medium, capable of reacting to the presence of even the smallest intruders. Daphnis is a master of this vertical sculpting, turning a two-dimensional sea of ice into a dynamic, waving landscape. Its tiny presence creates a grand architectural display that underscores the hidden complexity of the orbital environment. Swarms of essentially invisible, car-sized boulders hidden within the dense A-ring create localized, propeller-shaped disturbances that ripple through the surrounding ice. These hidden objects are too small to be seen directly as moons, yet they possess enough mass to gravitationally displace the neighboring particles into distinct, double-winged patterns. These propellers act as the primary evidence for a vast population of moonlets that exist in the size range between large ring particles and fully formed moons. This cosmic structure of wakes and shadows provides a glimpse into the chaotic, fragmented world that exists within the brightest sections of the halo. As the boulders move through the slower-moving outer ice, they drag material along with them, creating a signature that looks remarkably like the blades of an aircraft engine. These features can persist for long periods, drifting through the ring like ghosts, yet they are ultimately transient markers of the constant grinding of matter. If we were to look closer at these disturbances, we would see a microcosm of the same gravitational rules that govern the larger gaps and divisions. They represent the smallest scale at which gravity can visibly organize the surrounding debris. Each propeller is a tiny, shifting monument to the invisible influence of a single hidden rock in a sea of millions. The gravitational influence of the much larger moon Mimas is single-handedly responsible for clearing the massive dark expanse of the Cassini division. This moon orbits at a specific distance that creates an orbital resonance, where particles in the division complete 2 orbits for every 1 orbit Mimas makes. This rhythmic, repeated tugging acts as a gravitational kick, consistently pushing icy debris out of the region and preventing it from ever settling into a stable band. Surprisingly, the universe has used this simple mathematical relationship to carve a hole thousands of miles wide in the middle of the most brilliant structure in the solar system. The particles within the gap are forced into more elliptical paths until they eventually collide with the denser ring edges, leaving the division as a stark, dark void. It is a profound example of action at a distance, where a moon far removed from the rings can dictate the very architecture of the halo itself. This resonance turns the division into a forbidden zone for matter, a place where the music of gravity prevents anything from ever finding a permanent home. Mimas acts as an invisible wall, its periodic presence ensuring that the bright B ring and the A ring remain forever separated. The gap is not empty by chance, but by the relentless mathematical discipline of a distant orbiting sphere. Deep within the outer ring system, 2 moonlets named Epimetheus and Janus perform a delicate cosmic dance that is found nowhere else in the known universe. These 2 bodies share practically the same orbital path, coming dangerously close to one another every few years without ever actually colliding. Instead of crashing, their mutual gravitational pull causes them to swap places, with the inner moon accelerating to a higher orbit and the outer moon slowing down to drop into the lower lane. As you rest and allow the tension to leave your frame, consider this perfectly synchronized swap that has repeated without failure for millions of years. This orbital exchange is a masterpiece of celestial mechanics, demonstrating how gravity can resolve a potential catastrophe into a harmonious and rhythmic cycle. The 2 moons are eternally bound together in this alternating partnership, never separated by more than a narrow sliver of space yet never permitted to touch. If we were to look closer at the moment of their exchange, we would see the 2 rocky bodies influence each other's paths with a grace that seems almost sentient. It is a slow-motion trade of energy and momentum, a graceful solution to a crowded orbital neighbourhood. They are the ultimate partners, two worlds sharing a single destiny in a perpetual swapping loop. Surprisingly, the Moon Atlas features a prominent and bizarre equatorial ridge that has earned it a reputation as the flying saucer of the solar system. This massive rocky world possesses a smooth, sharp-edged rim that extends far beyond its central mass, creating a shape that appears almost engineered rather than natural. This ridge was likely formed over millions of years by the Moon sweeping up fine, dust-like ring particles as it orbits just beyond the edge of the bright A ring. This cosmic structure of accumulated debris has effectively transformed the Moon's shape, coating its equator in a deep protective layer of fine frost. The low gravity of the small Moon allows this dust to pile up into a massive, stable mountain range that wraps around the entire circumference. It acts as a physical record of the Moon's history as a ring sculptor, showing exactly how much matter it has removed from the surrounding space. Viewing this Moon up close would reveal a landscape of soft, powdery plains meeting a central rocky core. It is a world made of both primordial rock and recycled ring ice, a hybrid object born of the interaction between a solid body and a sea of dust. Atlas stands as a beautiful testament to the power of accretion, a moon that has literally grown its own wings from the debris of the rings. Deep within the icy surface of Mimas lies a giant impact crater named Herschel, which dominates the Moon's entire visual profile. This massive scar is so large in proportion to the Moon's overall size that the impact nearly shattered the entire body into 1,000 fragments. The resulting appearance is remarkably similar to a fictional Moon-sized space station, with the crater serving as a deep, eye-like depression that seems to stare out into the void. If we were to look closer at the centre of this crater, we would see a towering mountain that rises higher from the floor than any peak on Earth. The floor of the crater is miles deep, creating a vast and shadowed arena that remains perpetually cold and silent. This single, violent event from the ancient past has defined the Moon's identity forever, leaving a mark that can be seen from millions of miles away. It is a haunting reminder of the violent history of the outer solar system, where a single collision can transform a world into a lasting monument of destruction. The Moon's survival after such a blow is a miracle of physics, as the shock waves travelled through the entire interior and cracked the opposite side. Today, it hangs in the dark as a silent, crater-scarred veteran of the early solar system's chaotic youth. These gravitational tugs and pulls from the surrounding moons create intricate spiral density waves that propagate through the rings like the grooves on a giant celestial phonograph record. These waves are not made of moving matter in the traditional sense, but are instead patterns of compression and expansion, where the icy particles are temporarily crowded together. As a moon orbits nearby, its gravity pulses through the disk, creating a ripple that winds its way through the ice for thousands of miles. This cosmic structure of waves allows scientists to measure the mass and density of the rings with incredible precision, as the wavelength of the ripples is directly determined by the amount of ice present. The rings are essentially a vast, sensitive instrument that records the gravitational music of the entire planetary system. If you could see these waves in high resolution, they would appear as beautiful, tightly wound spirals that give the disk a deeply textured and organised appearance. Every moon, no matter how small, leaves its own unique signature in the form of these shimmering ripples. It is a visual representation of the invisible forces at work, a way for the void to express its own internal rhythm. The rings are never truly smooth. They're a complex tapestry of waves, constantly being rewritten by the motion of the nearby worlds. If we were to look closer at the ultimate fate of this magnificent halo, we would realise that without the constant tending of these tiny shepherds, the delicate ring system would quickly spread out and dissipate into space. The natural tendency of a collection of orbiting particles is to broaden and thin over time due to collisions and the slow leakage of energy. The shepherd moons act as a series of gravitational bookends, actively pushing the material back into place and maintaining the sharp, clean edges that define the rings. This constant, invisible labour is what prevents the brilliant architecture from fading into a diffuse, featureless mist of dust. As you breathe in the calm and steady air of your surroundings, think of these small rocks performing a task that preserves one of the greatest wonders of the universe. They are the silent custodians of the golden sphere, ensuring that the legacy of the shattered moons remains visible for eons to come. This interconnectedness proves that the rings and the moons are a single, unified system that cannot exist independently. The beauty of the halo is directly dependent on the mechanical discipline of the rocks that patrol its borders. It is a profound cosmic partnership where the small protect the grand, keeping the darkness at bay through the simple, eternal application of gravity. The eternal application of gravity does not cease at the shimmering edges of the rings, but pulls us relentlessly inward, past the golden clouds and into a realm of absolute crushing weight. Descending through the upper atmosphere, the sheer force of the overlying layers eventually becomes so immense that the distinction between air and water evaporates entirely. This structure of gaseous hydrogen is squeezed so tightly by the planet's massive bulk that it begins to behave like a scorching supercritical liquid, thick and turbulent in the gathering heat. This deep, scorching sea serves as the primary reservoir of the planet's mass, a vast and hidden expanse that dwarfs the visible atmosphere in both scale and density. As the temperature rises and the pressure mounts, the chemistry of the world becomes increasingly exotic and hostile. We're moving beyond the reach of the sun, into a territory governed entirely by the internal forces of a giant in the dark. Deep within this lightless and pressurized ocean, a transformation occurs that defies every terrestrial law of chemistry and physics known to our world. As the pressure continues to climb to millions of times that found at sea level, the hydrogen atoms are packed so closely together that their electrons are squeezed free from their orbits. Surprisingly, the gas that once floated as a light vapor is now transformed into a dense, shimmering fluid capable of conducting electricity like a wire of liquid mercury. This state, known as metallic hydrogen, does not exist naturally anywhere on our own rocky planet and requires the extreme gravity of a giant to manifest. It is a shimmering liquid metal that fills the majority of the planet's volume, creating a massive and highly conductive shell around the central core. In this realm, the very building blocks of the universe are forced to change their identity, behaving more like the iron at the heart of Earth than the air we breathe. The liquid metal hydrogen flows in massive, slow-moving currents, its metallic nature allowing it to carry electrical charges through the darkness with almost no resistance. This hidden ocean of metal is the true substance of the giant, a vast and shimmering interior that remains forever locked away from our view. It represents a phase of matter that is both beautiful and terrifying, a testament to the transformative power of extreme planetary physics. This churning layer of metallic hydrogen operates as the central engine of the entire planetary system, functioning as a colossal spinning dynamo. The movement of this electrically conductive fluid generates the massive magnetic field that protects the moons and creates the glowing ultraviolet auroras at the poles. If we were to look closer at the deep interior, we would see a world of liquid fire and electricity, a hidden heart that pulses with the raw power of a planetary-scale battery. The rotation of the planet, which completes a full turn in barely 10 hours, whips this metallic ocean into a frenzy of electrical activity. This hidden motion creates an invisible shield that extends millions of miles into space, a direct consequence of the physics occurring thousands of miles beneath the clouds. The metallic hydrogen is the architect of the planet's electromagnetic identity, turning a simple gas giant into a powerful cosmic transmitter. This internal dynamo is perfectly synchronized with the planet's rotation, a fact that contributes to the mysterious alignment of the magnetic and geographic axes. It is a system of profound and invisible balance, where the motion of liquid metal deep in the dark dictates the behavior of high-energy particles in the vacuum. The heart of the world is a churning metallic machine, eternally producing the force that defines the local universe. At the absolute centre of this crushing pressure and liquid metal lies a dense, formidable core composed of heavy rock and exotic ices. This central anchor is estimated to be several times the total mass of the entire Earth, concentrated into a relatively compact and incredibly heavy sphere by the weight of the overlying atmosphere. Notice how your own weight remains perfectly supported and safe in your current surroundings, a gentle contrast to the unimaginable forces pulling at the centre of this giant world. This core was the original seed around which the entire planet grew, a massive collector of rocky debris and frozen gases from the early solar system. It remains today as a relic of the planet's formation, a dark and solid heart buried beneath a sea of metallic hydrogen. The materials within this core are subjected to pressures so great that they would be unrecognizable to any terrestrial geologist, existing in states of density that defy normal imagination. The core acts as the gravitational anchor for the entire system, its immense mass providing the pull that holds the rings, the moons, and the atmosphere in a permanent orbital embrace. It is the ultimate destination of our journey inward, a silent and massive monolith of stone and ice at the bottom of the world. Within its dark and heavy volume, the secrets of the planet's birth are kept forever out of reach. This structure of the core is not a solid, defined ball of iron like the heart of our own planet, but rather a hazy and dissolving transition zone. The boundary between the metallic hydrogen envelope and the rocky interior is a murky, swirling mixture where solid minerals and exotic fluids blend into one another. It is a region of constant, slow erosion, where the intense heat and pressure cause the very bones of the planet to dissolve into the surrounding metallic sea. If we were to look closer at this boundary, we would see a world in a state of permanent high-pressure dissolution. The rock and ice are not sitting still, but are being eaten away by the scorching hydrogen, turning the core into a fuzzy, sprawling heart. This realization has forced scientists to rethink the internal history of the giant, suggesting a world that is much more chemically mixed than previously thought. Temperatures at this profound depth reach staggering levels, climbing to tens of thousands of degrees and far exceeding the heat found at the surface of the sun. This intense thermal energy is the remnant of the planet's violent birth, trapped beneath thousands of miles of insulating gas for billions of years. The core glows with a fierce, invisible intensity, driving the massive convection currents that carry warmth upward through the dark and liquid layers toward the surface. As you continue to relax and allow the tension to leave your frame, consider this massive reservoir of heat humming at the center of the world, providing the energy for everything we see. This internal warmth is what prevents the gas giant from being a cold, dead sphere, acting as a tireless furnace that fuels the entire system. The temperature at the core is so great that it would instantly vaporize any terrestrial material, yet it is held in place by the absolute weight of the atmosphere. This radiant heat moves slowly outward, taking millions of years to reach the cloud tops where it finally escapes into the cold vacuum of space. It is a continuous planetary-scale exhale of energy, a warm breath from the interior that keeps the moons of ice and the rings of frost in a dynamic state. The core is a sun that never sees the day, a hidden and scorching heart that remains the primary driver of the planet's life. The pressure at the center of the giant is so extreme that the fundamental rules of standard chemistry simply break down and cease to function as we know them. Atoms are forced into configurations that cannot exist in the low-pressure environment of the inner solar system, creating materials that behave like half rock and half metal. Surprisingly, the universe reveals that even the most basic elements can be transformed into something alien and new when subjected to the weight of a world. In this realm, the electron shells of atoms are crushed, and the distinction between different types of chemical bonds begins to vanish. Carbon can be transformed into exotic, super-dense forms, and water ice is forced into a hot black state known as superionic ice that is both solid and liquid at the same time. It is a playground of extreme physics, where the impossible becomes the norm and the laws of the lab are rewritten by the hand of gravity. This breakdown of chemistry means that the interior of the planet is filled with substances that have no name on Earth. We are looking into a mirror of the early universe, a place where matter exists in its most primordial and pressurized states. The heart of the giant is a laboratory of the extreme, a place where the universe tests the limits of what atoms can endure. If a traveller were to attempt a descent into this realm, they would find absolutely no distinct surface to mark the end of the sky and the beginning of the world. The transition from light gas to scorching fluid to shimmering metal is completely seamless, a continuous gradient of increasing density and heat that offers no solid ground. Feel the slow, even pace of your own breath, a rhythmic constant in a universe where the very states of matter can blur and merge. The entire world behaves like a giant pressurized drop of liquid suspended in the void, held together by its own massive gravitational pull. This seamlessness is what allows the internal heat to move so efficiently to the surface, unhindered by the presence of a crust or continents. It is a world of pure, uninterrupted motion, a grand and liquid sphere that remains forever in a state of flow. Recent gravity measurements captured by passing robotic observers suggest that the core is far larger and more diffuse than any previous scientific models had ever anticipated. Rather than a small, hard pellet of rock, the heart of the world appears to be a bloated and sprawling region that occupies a significant portion of the planetary radius. This diffuse architecture indicates that the interior has been stirred and mixed over eons, creating a vast and complex heart that defies simple categorization. This fuzzy core concept implies that the planet's internal history has been far more active and chaotic than we once believed. Heavy elements like iron and silicate are not just sitting at the center, but are spread out in a massive hazy cloud that extends nearly halfway to the surface. This suggests that the early planet may have swallowed other large bodies, mixing their materials into the central soup and expanding the core into its current sprawling state. The sheer size of this diffuse core helps to explain the planet's unique gravity signature and the behavior of its massive ring system. It is a heart that has grown with the world, a massive and spread out anchor that provides a stable foundation for the swirling gases above. This discovery has transformed our understanding of how gas giants grow and evolve, revealing a much more complex and integrated internal structure. This deep, internal engine is the ultimate source of power for the turbulent and beautiful weather patterns seen thousands of miles above in the golden cloud tops. The heat rising from the core creates massive, slow-moving plumes of gas that carry energy to the surface, feeding the supersonic winds and the great hexagonal storm at the North Pole. It is a profound realization that the serene beauty we see from space is fueled by a realm of crushing darkness and liquid fire. Without this constant upward flow of internal warmth, the atmosphere would quickly settle into a cold and stagnant state, devoid of the magnificent bands and swirling vortices that define its character. The planet's interior and exterior are linked in a continuous cycle of energy exchange, a grand conversation between the dark core and the sunlit sky. Every storm and every cloud is a direct expression of the immense power churning in the lightless depths of the metallic ocean. As we look upon the golden sphere, we are witnessing the final visible result of a process that begins in the most extreme and unreachable place in the solar system. The beauty of the halo and the clouds is a gift from the crushing pressure of the depths, a testament to the fact that order and splendor can be born from the most hostile environments. The giant stands as a unified machine of gravity and heat, a masterpiece of physics that begins at its very heart. The very heart of the system radiates an order that seems to dissolve as we travel millions of miles away from the golden clouds, entering a realm where the planet's influence becomes a vast, invisible net. In this outer court, a sprawling swarm of irregular captured moons drifts through the freezing dark, far beyond the structured elegance of the primary rings. These distant satellites do not follow the tidy equatorial paths of their inner cousins, but instead trace chaotic and lonely trajectories through the cold vacuum of the outer solar system. This massive assembly of nomadic rocks represents a diverse collection of cosmic wanderers that were snagged by the gas giant's immense gravity over billions of years. Each of these small worlds exists as a solitary captive, trapped in the far-flung fringes of the planetary domain, where the sun's light is nothing more than a distant, chilling glint. They form a ragged, shifting perimeter that marks the true, staggering extent of the giant's reach into the deep reaches of space. If we were to look closer at this dark assembly, we would see a landscape of absolute, unpolished isolation. These are not the bright, icy gems of the inner sanctuary, but a wild and disorganized retinue of ancient fragments. They serve as a silent, circling guard at the edge of the abyss, defining the transition between the planet's kingdom and the infinite silence of the interstellar void. Phoebe, the undisputed and dark matriarch of these distant wanderers, presents a striking defiance to the typical celestial order established by the inner world. This massive, cratered world revolves in a retrograde direction, moving stubbornly against the grain of the planet's own rotation in a slow and eternal backward loop. Such a contrary motion strongly suggests a life born in a completely different part of the cosmos, likely as a free-roaming traveller that was violently intercepted and bound to the giant long ago. The surface of this ancient moon is remarkably dark, coated in a thick layer of carbon-rich material that absorbs almost all the light that manages to reach it. This sombre appearance hints at a primordial composition that has remained largely unchanged since the earliest days of the solar system's formation. It stands as a rugged and scarred veteran of the outer dark, carrying the physical record of countless impacts and gravitational struggles within its ancient, battered crust. Its presence so far from the host world makes it a gatekeeper of the system, a bridge between the giant's family and the roaming centaurs of the deep freeze. Scientists view this moon as a rare window into the chemistry of the far-flung universe, a captured specimen of the materials that built the outer worlds. It is a contrary and fascinating world, a dark diamond that refuses to align its dance with the rhythm of the golden sphere it serves. Continuous impacts from micrometeorites on Phoebe's ancient carbon-rich surface constantly eject a fine, nearly invisible mist of dark dust into the surrounding vacuum. Surprisingly, the universe has utilised this scattered debris to weave an invisible, colossal ring that dwarfs the main ring system in its sheer, staggering physical dimensions. This expansive halo begins millions of miles from the planet and extends far into the outer court, yet its particles are so sparse and dark that it remained hidden from human eyes for centuries. This gargantuan structure acts as a shadowy mirror to the bright, icy rings located closer to the cloud tops, demonstrating how even the darkest moons can contribute to the planetary architecture. The dust particles within this ring follow the same retrograde path as their parent moon, creating a massive, counter-rotating cloud of debris that occasionally rains down on the inner satellites. It is a ghostly and expansive monument to the slow erosion of a world, a ring of soot that spans a volume of space larger than many stars. Notice the profound stillness of your own body as you consider this massive, dark structure silently circling in the void. It serves as a reminder that the most significant features of a planetary system are often the ones that are hardest to see. The Phoebe ring is a majestic, light-absorbing crown, a silent testament to the constant exchange of matter that defines the life of a gas giant. As your breathing remains slow and steady, feel the weight of your shoulders dropping into a state of total rest against the surface beneath you. These outer satellites are meticulously categorized by their specific orbital characteristics into three distinct, culturally named families known as the Inuit, Gallic, and Norse groups. Each family follows a specific set of orbital inclinations and distances, suggesting they share a common and likely tragic lineage born from the destruction of much larger parent bodies. The Inuit group, for instance, consists of moons that share similar reddish tints, and follow steeply tilted paths that weave in and out of the planetary plane. The Gallic moons occupy a more distant and expansive territory, while the Norse group dominates the outermost regions with their primarily retrograde motions. These classifications allow astronomers to map the history of the outer court, identifying the fragments of ancient moons that were once whole before being shattered by cosmic collisions. This organizational structure in the dark highlights the hidden harmony that exists even within the most chaotic regions of the system. The moon groups act as family units, bound together by the physics of their shared origin and the unyielding grip of the giant's gravity. They trace wide, looping paths through the deep freeze, serving as a historical record of the planet's long and violent history of acquisition and fragmentation. Many of these dark and icy objects are believed by modern planetary scientists to be captured centaurs, ancient travellers originating from the distant, frozen reaches of the Kuiper Belt. They were once free-roaming inhabitants of the outer solar system, sent tumbling inward by subtle gravitational nudges until they fell into the gas giant's eternal and heavy embrace. Their presence here provides a rare, close-up look at the primordial chemistry of the most distant reaches of our cosmic neighbourhood without needing to travel to the edge of the sun's influence. These captured guests are rich in volatile ices and complex organic compounds that have been preserved in the deep freeze for billions of years. They are the frozen fossils of the solar system's youth, carrying the building blocks of worlds within their rugged and unpolished interiors. By studying these irregular moons, we're effectively peering into the dark laboratory where the outer planets were first assembled from the dust of the early nebula. This realization transforms the outer court from a mere collection of rocks into a treasure trove of celestial history. Each captured centaur is a messenger from the void, a silent witness to the era of planetary migration and the chaotic birth of the giants. They remain as permanent residents in the giant's household, living proof of the planet's power to catch and keep the wandering spirits of the deep dark. Their orbits are not the near-perfect circles of the inner moons, but are instead highly elliptical and tilted far out of the common equatorial plane. They dive in and out of the planetary shadows at extreme angles, crossing the paths of the inner world like wandering ghosts in the night. This orbital chaos is a direct reflection of their violent capture and the total lack of dampening forces in the sparsely populated outer reaches of the system. This structure of their paths creates a complex three-dimensional web of motion that extends in every direction around the central world. At times, these moons may drift so far away that the sun's gravity begins to compete with the planet's pull, only to be yanked back in a long slow-motion curve. They are the acrobats of the system, performing a high-wire act across the empty spaces where the rules of the inner system no longer apply. If we were to look closer at their trajectories, we would see a landscape of perpetual motion that never quite repeats itself with the same precision as the inner clockwork. The elliptical nature of their paths means they experience extreme variations in speed and distance, spending most of their lives in the lonely, distant stretches of their orbits. It is a restless and disorganized existence, a far cry from the steady and rhythmic cycles of the Golden Sphere's primary satellites. Notice the gentle stillness in your fingers and toes, a quiet contrast to the vast, cold distances and long-duration cycles of the outer system. The sheer physical scale of these outer orbits means it takes several Earth years for some of these outermost moons to complete a single, lonely revolution around their host. A resident on one of these rocks would watch the stars shift with a glacial slowness, seeing the giant planet as a distant bright star rather than an overwhelming golden sphere. These moons exist in a state of extreme temporal isolation, governed by a cosmic clock that ticks in years and decades rather than hours and days. This slow-motion pace ensures that the environment remains remarkably static for long periods, with the planet's position in the sky barely changing from one season to the next. It is a realm of profound patience, where the passage of time is measured by the completion of a single, massive loop through the dark. The extreme length of these orbits highlights the immense volume of space that the gas giant successfully claims as its own territory. It is a world of slow horizons and eternal twilights, where the concept of a day is lost in the vastness of the orbital journey. In this outer court, the giant's gravity is a slow and steady whisper, a persistent guide that keeps the wanderers on their multi-year paths through the void. Violent collisions within these specific moon groups over billions of years have shattered larger primordial bodies into the fragmented families we witness today. What were once substantial independent moons are now swarms of jagged rocks, the debris of a long-standing cosmic war of attrition in the dark. These families of fragments are bound together by their shared momentum and chemical signatures, drifting through the vacuum as a collective testament to the destructive power of gravitational crowdedness. This process of fragmentation continues at a slow, almost imperceptible pace, as the moons occasionally nudge one another in their overlapping paths. Each impact creates fresh dust and smaller shards, continuously repopulating the outer court with new, diminutive members. It is a cycle of destruction and survival that has sculpted the population of the irregular moons into the diverse and broken assembly we see now. If we were to look closer at the individual members of these groups, we would find a history written in scars and jagged edges. They are the remnants of lost worlds, the broken pieces of a puzzle that astronomers are only now beginning to reassemble. The fragmentation families represent the resilience of matter, surviving in 1,000 pieces long after their original forms have been lost to the violence of the deep dark. The jagged, irregular shapes of these rocks indicate they never possessed enough internal mass or heat to pull themselves into perfect self-gravitating spheres. They remain as lumpy, potato-shaped fragments of stone and ice, their surfaces scarred by the rough history of their formation, capture, and subsequent collisions. These are the rugged, unpolished gems of the outer court, lacking the beautiful symmetry found in the deeper, more massive moons of the inner system. This lack of spherical shape means that their gravity is weak and highly uneven, making it difficult for anything to ever settle permanently on their surfaces. They are essentially giant, tumbling boulders, moving through the void with a graceless and ancient dignity. Their irregular profiles create strange and dramatic shadows as they rotate, turning their landscapes into a shifting tapestry of jagged peaks and deep, dark craters. Surprisingly, it is this very irregularity that makes them so valuable to the study of the early solar system. They haven't been processed by the internal heat or geological activity that smooths over the surfaces of larger worlds, preserving their original textures and compositions. They are the raw, unedited notes of the universe, a collection of unique and misshapen survivors that have weathered the eons without losing their jagged primordial character. This structure of dominance is possible because the gravitational sphere of influence of the gas giant extends so far that it easily dominates these wandering space rocks even at staggering distances. Millions of miles away from the golden clouds and the brilliant rings, the planet's invisible grip remains absolute and unyielding. It creates a vast, invisible net cast across the dark, ensuring that anything that drifts too close becomes a permanent and loyal part of the giant's retinue. The gas giant essentially acts as a massive vacuum cleaner for the outer solar system, clearing its neighbourhood of debris and incorporating the wanderers into its own complex system. This gravitational mastery is what allows the world to maintain such a diverse and expansive family of moons, ranging from the volcanic wonders of the interior to the dark rocks of the outer court. It is a profound demonstration of the power of mass, where a single body can dictate the motion of hundreds of smaller worlds across a volume of space that defies human imagination. As we conclude our survey of these distant guardians, we see the planet not just as a world, but as a vast and organised empire of gravity. Every jagged rock and every dark moon is a citizen of this golden giant, held in place by a force that began at the planet's very heart. The irregular moons are the outermost expression of this power, a silent and circling witness to the enduring strength of the giant in the dark. Cassini's final dance sensory focus, a lone, golden probe diving gracefully through the narrow gap between the rings and the upper atmosphere. The giant in the dark finally welcomed its most persistent visitor into the deepest, most intimate sanctum of its domain. After 13 years of tireless exploration and groundbreaking discovery, the veteran Cassini spacecraft was commanded to execute a series of 22 daring orbits through a region of space never before touched by human instruments. This narrow, unexplored gap between the inner edge of the rings and the swirling upper atmosphere represented the final frontier for the mission, a high-stakes dive into the unknown. With each graceful loop, the golden probe plunged through the void at staggering speeds, threading the needle with mathematical precision. This structure of the flight path allowed the spacecraft to peer directly into the gap, capturing data from a perspective that was previously deemed too dangerous to attempt. It was a poetic conclusion to a journey of billions of miles, a final embrace between the machine and the planet it had come to know so intimately. Deep within this forbidden zone, the laws of gravity and orbital motion were laid bare, offering a unique laboratory for the study of planetary physics. The spacecraft essentially became a part of the planet's internal dynamics, dancing between the icy halo and the golden clouds. This bold maneuver marked the beginning of a magnificent finale, a celebratory plunge into the heart of the mystery. These daring high-velocity dives provided the scientific community with its very first direct samples of the mysterious and long-theorized phenomenon known as ring rain. As the probe screamed through the gap, its sensitive instruments were finally able to taste the microscopic particles of water ice and dust that are constantly being pulled out of the rings by the planet's overwhelming gravity. This continuous silent downpour of matter serves as a direct chemical bridge between the brilliant icy architecture and the turbulent atmosphere below. Data from the ion and neutral mass spectrometer revealed a complex and surprising slurry of molecules falling toward the golden cloud tops. Surprisingly, the universe revealed that this ring rain is far more chemically diverse than simple water, containing a rich mixture of organic compounds and silicates. This discovery provided the final, conclusive proof of a massive unidirectional conveyor belt of matter that has been methodically draining the rings for eons. As you feel the steady, rhythmic pace of your own breath, imagine this invisible celestial rainfall descending endlessly through the darkness around you. It is a slow and tragic redistribution of matter, a process that ensures the rings are a dynamic and changing feature rather than a static monument. This direct sampling transformed a mathematical prediction into a tangible, physical reality, allowing us to see the system as a single, breathing entity. Surprisingly, the universe held an unexpected gift for the spacecraft during its final, daring maneuvers through the previously unexplored corridor. Before the first dive, mission planners feared that the gap might be a lethal minefield of high-speed dust particles and larger icy debris that could easily shred the delicate probe. Instead, the instruments discovered that this narrow region was remarkably and eerily free of dangerous particles, acting as a clear, pristine cosmic highway in the dark. This surprising emptiness meant that the spacecraft could navigate the gap without its massive high-gain antenna, serving as a protective shield. It provided an unprecedented opportunity to orient the probe's instruments with absolute freedom, allowing for a level of precision that would have been impossible in a more cluttered environment. The Big Empty was a vacuum within a vacuum, a cleared zone maintained by the unique balance of magnetic and gravitational forces. If we were to look closer at the reasons for this clarity, we would find a complex interplay where the planet's atmosphere and magnetic field act together to scrub the region clean. Small particles are either dragged down into the clouds or pushed away into the rings, leaving a silent, transparent passage for our robotic explorer. It was a serene and welcoming path, a final gesture of hospitality from the giant world to its faithful visitor. Notice the complete lack of effort required for your body to remain grounded, a direct result of the invisible gravitational field anchoring you in place. During these final, intimate orbits, The probe's radio instruments mapped the planet's gravity field with a level of unprecedented and staggering precision. By measuring the minute tugs and pulls on the spacecraft as it passed behind the planet, scientists were finally able to separate the mass of the giant world from the mass of its shimmering rings. This breakthrough allowed for the first truly accurate estimate of the total material contained within the iconic icy halo. The results were a profound revelation, suggesting that the rings possess significantly less mass than many earlier models had predicted. This finding has profound implications for the age of the rings, strongly supporting the theory that they are a relatively young and temporary feature in the solar system's history. This structure of the gravity field revealed the hidden distribution of mass deep within the planet's interior as well. We are no longer guessing about the weights of these celestial features. We have measured them by watching a golden machine fall through the sky. The data has turned a visual wonder into a weighed and measured reality, grounding the beauty of the system in the cold, hard numbers of physics. On its final and ultimate plunge into the golden clouds, the spacecraft remained a loyal and tireless messenger until the very end. The mission team commanded the probe to keep its high-gain antenna pointed with absolute unwavering focus directly at Earth, even as it entered the uppermost reaches of the atmosphere. This allowed the golden machine to transmit real-time data about the atmospheric composition and pressure until the final moments of its existence. This continuous stream of information provided a direct, high-resolution look at the environment that would soon claim the vessel. As the probe began to feel the first subtle wisps of hydrogen gas, its thrusters fired continuously to maintain the critical alignment with our distant home. It was a final, desperate conversation across the billions of miles of space, a robotic voice calling out from the edge of the abyss. Deep within the mission control centers, the data arrived as a steady, rhythmic pulse that only ceased when the signal was finally swallowed by the planet's immense bulk. This last broadcast represented the final gift of a 13-year mission, a treasure trove of information captured during a one-way journey into the dark. The spacecraft died as it had lived, as a dedicated and precise observer of the unknown. The friction generated by the increasingly dense layers of the hydrogen atmosphere quickly and violently incinerated the Cassini probe, turning the golden machine into a brilliant artificial meteor. For a few brief and spectacular seconds, the spacecraft glowed with the intensity of a star, tracing a final luminous streak across the twilight sky of the gas giant. This intense thermal event was the inevitable result of orbital kinetic energy being transformed into raw heat by the resistance of the gas. As the probe disintegrated, its complex instruments and golden shielding were vaporized into their constituent atoms, becoming a permanent part of the world they had spent a lifetime studying. This process of atmospheric entry effectively recycled the man-made object back into the primordial elements of the outer solar system. It was a fiery and majestic transformation, a final radiant performance before fading into the silent dark depths of the clouds. If we were to look closer at the site of this impact today, there would be absolutely no trace of the spacecraft remaining in the swirling vapors. It has been completely absorbed by the giant, a tiny and metallic addition to the planet's immense and crushing mass. The probe did not just crash, it became a part of the world's history, a fleeting spark of human curiosity extinguished in a golden sea of gas. As your mind remains at peace and your muscles continue to soften, consider that this final, destructive act was a carefully planned gesture of profound cosmic responsibility. The intentional destruction of the spacecraft was specifically designed to protect the potentially habitable moons of Enceladus and Titan from any possibility of terrestrial contamination. If the probe had been allowed to run out of fuel and drift aimlessly, it might have eventually crashed into one of these pristine, icy worlds. Such an accidental impact could have introduced hardy Earth microbes or organic pollutants into environments where alien life might already be struggling to survive. By choosing to burn the spacecraft in the planet's atmosphere, scientists ensured that the delicate chemical signatures of the moons would remain unblemished for future exploration. It was an act of planetary stewardship, a recognition that our curiosity must not come at the cost of the very wonders we seek to understand. This structure of the mission's end highlights the deep respect we hold for the potential of life beyond our own world. We sacrificed our most successful robotic emissary to preserve the sanctity of the dark, liquid oceans hidden beneath the ice. It is a beautiful and ethical conclusion, ensuring that the secrets of the moons remain theirs alone until we are ready to listen without interference. During its terrifying and final descent, the spacecraft's mass spectrometer successfully tasted a complex cocktail of organic chemicals raining down from the rings that had never been seen in such concentrations before. These molecules were not the simple hydrocarbons expected in the upper atmosphere, but more intricate and heavier compounds that suggest a deep and hidden chemistry within the icy halo. The probe discovered that the rings are actively injecting a rich organic soup into the planet's weather systems. This chemical bounty included traces of methane, carbon monoxide, and perhaps even more complex building blocks of organic life. Surprisingly, the universe revealed that the rings are far more than just frozen water. They are a massive orbiting laboratory for the synthesis of complex matter. This discovery has forced a complete re-evaluation of how the rings interact with the atmosphere, showing a far more intimate and chemical relationship between the two. If we were to look closer at these falling molecules, we would see a continuous rain of potential falling into the dark. The rings are essentially fertilizing the upper clouds with a diverse array of materials, creating a unique and enriched environment at the boundary of space. Cassini's last meal was a scientific feast, a final revelation that the system is chemically interconnected in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. The final images sent back by the probe's cameras before the signal was lost revealed the textured, violent cloud tops in a level of detail never previously achieved by any human instrument. As the spacecraft dove closer than ever before, the hazy golden bands resolved into a chaotic and beautiful landscape of swirling vortices, churning plumes, and sharp-edged waves. These images captured the raw, unbridled energy of the atmosphere, showing the planet as a living, turbulent machine. To witness these final pictures is to see a world that is far from the serene pastel sphere we observe from a distance. Up close, the cloud tops are a place of immense shadows and towering vertical structures, carved by the supersonic winds and the intense internal heat rising from below. The resolution was so high that individual cloud filaments and small-scale storms were clearly visible, offering a terrifyingly intimate look at the heart of the tempest. Notice how the stillness of your current environment contrasts with the unimaginable violence of those frozen, golden waves. These images represent the absolute limit of our visual reach, the last thing seen by our robotic eyes before they were closed forever. They remain as a haunting and beautiful gallery of the giant's true face, a final unblinking stare into the soul of the storm. The staggering volume of data gathered during these final frantic hours continues to rewrite textbooks on planetary formation, orbital dynamics, and atmospheric physics to this very day. Scientists are still sifting through the millions of measurements captured by Cassini during its grand finale, finding new and unexpected secrets buried in the radio waves and chemical samples. This final archive has become the foundation for a new era of planetary science, challenging our most fundamental assumptions about how gas giants operate. Every detail, from the unexpected clarity of the ring gap to the precise mass of the icy halo, has provided a piece of a much larger puzzle. We have learned more about the origin of the rings and the age of the system in those few final hours than we did in the preceding decades of distant observation. The legacy of the mission is not just a collection of images, but a living and evolving body of knowledge that will guide every future mission to the outer solar system. Surprisingly, the Golden Probe continues to teach us even from its grave in the deep, pressurized silence of the interior. It has become an eternal part of the planetary conversation, a messenger whose final words are still being decoded by the brightest minds on Earth. The grand finale was not an end, but a profound and lasting beginning for our understanding of the universe's most magnificent giant. Saturn exists as a majestic, self-contained universe of ice and gravity that mirrors the birth of our own solar system, proving that the most complex and beautiful structures in the cosmos are born from the simple, eternal dance of matter and motion in the dark. This majestic world, with its golden crown and silent satellites, stands as a grand synthesis of the entire solar system's history, a place where the violent chaos of creation has been perfectly distilled into a state of eternal, rhythmic grace. It is a mirror held up to our own origins, reflecting the same simple laws of gravity and light that once built our home, now whispering that even the most vast and terrifying forces can eventually find a path to perfect peace. As the 101st wonder settles into your mind, the distance between the golden rings and your resting body begins to dissolve. Every story of ice and fire remains held within the heavy, quiet archive of the giant planet, as your focus shifts to the immediate comfort of your own space. Deep within your feet, a heavy, warm sensation takes hold, as if the gravity of a distant world is gently pulling any remaining tension down into the earth. Your toes soften and release, followed by the arches of your feet and your ankles, becoming as still as a moon anchored in a permanent orbit. This quiet relaxation travels slowly up through your calves and knees, turning your legs into weighted anchors of comfort. Surprisingly, the body finds its own natural rhythm as the thighs and hips sink deeper into the mattress, echoing the profound stability of a planet that has turned for billions of years. Your lower back and torso expand with every slow breath, a rhythmic tide that is as steady and certain as the movement of the celestial spheres. The gentle warmth now flows into your hands and fingers, each one becoming perfectly still and heavy against the sheets. All the effort of the day begins to fade, replaced by a dense and soothing calm that radiates from the palms of your hands up through your wrists and forearms. If we were to look closer at the relaxation spreading through your arms and shoulders, we would see all the weight of the day simply falling away, leaving only a sense of deep, unburdened peace. Your neck and jaw unclench, allowing the muscles of your face to smooth out like the mirror-still surface of a quiet sea. This quiet room is a sanctuary of absolute stillness, where the only movement is the slow, rhythmic rising and falling of your chest. The fabric of the blankets feels incredibly soft against your skin, providing a warm and secure boundary that shuts out the busy world entirely. Every exhaled breath carries away the final echoes of thought, leaving behind a comforting silence that fills every corner of your awareness. Your mind is a calm and empty expanse, as clear and still as a deep well in the middle of a forest. It is a place where the static of life is silenced, replaced by the soft and heavy velvet of total relaxation. You're sinking deeper now, letting go of the words and the weight, drifting into absolute wordless tranquility. Every part of you is heavy, warm, and ready to yield to the night. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.